Hey, what's up, guys? We have Scott Saslow here to talk about. Well, he was in a NASA as a I don't even know what you would call that. Like a
A subject.
yeah. Now he was a NASA subject. He's been in multiple movies as like an extra, and then he's also a graphic designer. So we're probably going to cover all three of those. So how's it going today? How you doing,
It-
Scott?
it's going okay. How are you?
I'm good. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll go from there.
Well, Scott Saslow, native Floridian. Um, been living in California, although I'm actually in Florida right now since as a freelancer, I figured I could start traveling. So I'm sort of in between trips right now, and we could talk about that too. Um, but yeah, I'm a freelance graphic designer. At one point, for a couple months, actually 15 years ago, about right now, I was a test subject for NASA, where I laid in bed for 30 days straight without getting up, and we'll talk about that. And when you live in LA, one of the cool sort of side jobs you can have is background. Um, and I lived in LA a couple times, most recently, from 2016 just until last year, and in between design jobs, get a message from Central Casting, are you free? And it's like, cool, I get to be on set tomorrow. So it's an interesting way to make money. But yeah, it's sort of, things are going okay. But yeah, graphic design, it was always like the second thing I was into. Ever since I was a kid, I really wanted to make movies, watched movies, even, Home Alone 2 was on the other night, because it's the holidays. And I remember at the elementary school book fair buying the making of Home Alone 2. They actually published a kid-friendly making of book at the school, and they sold it at the school book fair. I went to graduated high school, class of '01, went to Florida State, and their film school, very selective, and the odds were sort of against me from the start, and I hated living in the dorms, but didn't get into their film school. Ended up going to a school called Full Sail in Orlando, which is actually much more high profile now than it was that 20 years ago. And moved out to LA, worked there for a year and a half, or lived there for about a year and a half, worked as a movie studio file clerk, um, worked as an extra actually for a couple of weeks. I was the world's worst production assistant. Those are the guys on set who, get the coffee and all the odd jobs, pretty low on the totem pole, but you get to meet people and see how a set works and all that. But also, you know, did worked in records and archives department at one of the studios with one of my roommates. And if you've ever seen the show The IT Crowd, picture that. That's what it was like. And another friend of mine convinced me to move back to Florida, thinking, oh, we'll be bigger fish in a smaller pond. We can do our own stuff. And literally, as soon as I moved back, I realized I made a big mistake. And LA was going pretty well there. And eventually, I didn't have any other skills. We were sort of talking about this before. When you go to school or you have a passion or an interest or something, and, your family's like, you should probably have a backup plan. It's true because I didn't have one or any marketable skills. So I spent my 20s just in a series of go nowhere temp jobs, nice people. And some of the temp agencies were very good to me. But I ended up, I did this NASA thing, which we'll talk about. And then I took that money and went to my live at my aunt and uncle's in Jersey City, right across the river from Manhattan. Love walking around Manhattan. My family's from New York, but here I'm about to turn 30, and it's like I don't want to be a temp forever. I don't have a bachelor's degree. Um, so went back to school at 30 for graphic design. Graduated 3 years later. Next May it'll be coming up on 10 years. Magna cum laude, and moved back out to LA. A year later, and I had a 3 month internship at one of the big entertainment ad agencies out there doing movie posters. And the internship ended in early 2017, and I've been freelancing ever since. And it's been a long, strange trip. But sooner or later, and it's gradual. It doesn't happen just one day, but gradually you realize, like, yeah, this is all right. Like what this is everything that happened. Like it had to happen this way for this to happen now. And here I can travel and work from anywhere, and I have some awesome clients, and I could tell people I'm a graphic designer. Tell people you're a temp or a file clerk doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Then again, half the people I talk to have no idea what graphic design is anyway. But that's the short Cliff Notes version of it. But yeah, going back to school at 30, because it's like I had one lecture class, art history, and it's like I imagine, what if I sit down and 5 minutes into this, I just freak out and I can't do it anymore? You know, like I can't be back in school. That ship sailed. It's too late. But it worked out. And the best thing was early on when one of my design teachers uh, asked me to go outside. Naturally, I thought I was in trouble. And she's like, "Have you done this before?" And from that moment on, it was like, okay, I think I'm on the right path now.
Yeah, that's cool. So the first time when you went to film school, did you not graduate
No,
from?
I had to stay in the state of Florida. So yeah, I went to Florida State. There used to be a show called Movie Magic on the Discovery Channel. I think you can find clips of it on YouTube. And they profiled a student filmmaking team at FSU. They were doing like, cool stuff with models and crashing model planes and things like that. And it's like, oh, Florida State, I can go there. But their film school at the time, I think, only took 30 people a year, 15 freshmen and then 15 transfer students. So the odds were stacked from the beginning. And, they said if you want to get into the film school, get to know these people, get to know the people, hang out, work as a production assistant on student films. I think I worked as a PA on one film. I blocked traffic for 12 muggy, humid hours, and that was it. And I also found a lot of the people there to be very cliquey. And again, living in the dorm, I, hated it. And yeah, so I left after 2 semesters and I got my associate's degree at community college, Palm Beach Community College. And that was actually a blast. That was like going back to high school. It was 13th grade. And then my parents told me about this school in Orlando, Full Sail, and we did an open house, liked what I saw, and started there. And the program, it was like a year long, give or take. And it was literally the best and worst of times. I mean, we made some cool movies and some not so cool movies. I met two of my closest friends there. Um, One of our classmates actually passed away right before filming. So all of our films actually have dedications to this kid, um, bacterial meningitis. And, but at the end of the day, no one ever asked you, if you want to make movies, no one's ever going to ask for your film degree. No one's going to ever ask you for the piece of paper. They want to see what you can do. Although at the end of the day, just a good work ethic and enthusiasm and just being a good person gets you a long way. But I was so hell bent on directing and I co-directed because they were big on multiple directors. I co-directed one film, which not a great experience, and co-wrote another one. But it's like I couldn't. This stuff's embarrassing. I can't show it to anyone professionally. So a few of my classmates moved out to LA. They ended up calling me like a year later since someone moved out. I moved there, and yeah, just temp work, PA work. Met some cool people. Um, but realized, went back to Florida, but then realized like, damn, I actually had it pretty good. My situation there. But, so that's why after graphic design and getting that degree, I went back. And it was the right decision too. And, eventually when I get all the traveling out of my system, I'll probably head back to California again, but probably not for another year or two at least. But yeah, so at the time I had two associate's degrees, but now I have a BFA. And even then, that doesn't matter. No one asks to see my graphic design degree either, but it can at least
Yeah,
open a few more doors.
that's what I found out. I'm like in a similar situation
Yeah.
where I got my bachelor degree in psychology, didn't really use it like at all, and then did the same thing as you. I had like regular jobs, but then I would also have I had there was a period of time during like the 2008 to 2012
Hmm.
crash where like I just all I could get was temp jobs, and it was I know how that is where it's like you work for like a certain period of time, they're like, well, they're done with you, and then you just go to another one. But the main thing that I wanted to talk about, oh yeah, but then I considered going back, but people were like, you got to figure out something, go back or whatever. But it was like there was nothing that I really wanted to do. So I was like, I don't really want to spend more money, and there's nothing that I really want to do. So I ended up not going back. I still have the bachelor's in psychology, but like you said, no one really even like seems to even ask for the bachelor degree. But the main thing that I wanted to talk about is the directing and then the movies that you've been in, the PA work, because I'm also interested in that. I do like my own, definitely not movies, but like Instagram videos, YouTube
Hmm.
videos. I'm currently doing YouTube videos. For a long time, I was doing kind of like nature type. That's the best way to describe it, but it's like, go to the beach and film, or go to the mountains and film or whatever. So I'm very interested in that. I'm wondering what kind of movies are you into, or directors are you into? Like, what were you aspiring? What did you want to make, that type of thing, when you were a director,
Well, I mean, I
or
only really directed
when you
anything
were
in
when you
school.
were trying? Yeah, when you wanted to be a director, what were your
I mean, every other,
inspirations or whatever?
I mean, it might be cheesy to say now, but for a while, it's like every film student wanted to be Spielberg, or every film student wanted to be Quentin Tarantino. And
Yeah,
it's like you could count, like, after Pulp Fiction, like, God, how many movies came out that it tried to do that? And how many film students tried to do that? But I wanted to do, big summer, blockbuster type movies, and comedies and things like that. When I was in high school, I started writing, and this is back when, like American Pie and those movies were out, and I wanted to write sort of my take on that. But I've always been bad with structure, just the story structure, A to B to C, and I ended up with something like a 200-page first draft, and it's nothing that would be made now, or it would be made now and Netflix would put it on with no fanfare and it would just disappear and that would be it, which happens to too many movies now because, with streaming. Um, but we and in, actually, and I had Netflix. Um, I actually, right before film school, I worked at Best Buy, and how they're surviving, I have no idea. But I worked in movies and music. I actually got to work in that department. And I remember, this is 2003, my manager, we were talking about The Godfather, and I told him at that time I hadn't seen any of the films yet. And he looked at me like I was like from another planet. And that's kind of the problem when you're younger and you tell people you're a film geek or film buff or whatever. Um, Everyone just assumes you've seen everything. But I started subscribing to Netflix, and that's when they still did the discs, the actual physical discs, and I just tried to watch as many classics as I could. I almost felt like, you know, it's like, am I a film buff? I haven't seen this and this, but it's like, the point is you want to, there's no checklist, but and I did end up watching all three Godfathers in that week, and came back and told my manager that gave him a full report. But no, I wanted to do the big Spielberg, spectacle, stuff like that. But when I look back on it now, it's like I never had the temperament, for making movies, and dealing with hundreds of people. I mean, you have to make hundreds of decisions a day, and you can be wrong, but you have to have an answer. You can't not have an answer. So if someone asks, the pen, red or blue, pick blue, even if you don't know. If you say I don't know, then that's a problem. But at film school, the way it was structured, we had we did we the class split into 8 groups, and we made a short film over the span of a week, 2 groups per day. Can I curse on this? Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay. That was a clusterfuck. It was digital, early digital. So imagine like 100 students working on one film, and each group would basically get one scene, and no group spoke to any other. So it's like if you're filming on a living room set, our group would do our scene, and then the next group would come in and just be like, "Oh, I think that prop should be over there." It's like it's like no communication, horrible. And then we did 4 films on 16 millimeter, which was actually my finest hour there. Um, we still had multiple directors and this and that, but for whatever reason, the instructors chose a script because we all wrote scripts too, and the instructors chose a script about a flight attendant, and it took place on a passenger on an airplane. You know, it's like, well, how the hell are we going to build an airplane on our soundstage? And I actually made some calls and found a company that gave us thousands and thousands of dollars of airplane parts for like $300. We had windows, we had seats, we had overhead bins, we had a meal cart, we had a galley, like that half wall section. And actually, they gave awards at the end of the year, and I got one for set design, even though I technically didn't design or build anything. I just made some phone calls. But that was probably my best moment there. And then the one I co-directed, and those were actually shot on 35 millimeter film, 3 films. I co-directed one, co-wrote another, and the one I co-directed, that was a mess. And that was the one where actually the kid died like the day before filming. Um, and yeah, I mean, I doubt half the people in my classes even do anything in the business. You know, my 2 closest friends, one's a teacher and the other worked in a restaurant. But at the same time, if one of us won the lottery tomorrow, we'd totally make something. But you mentioned YouTube, and we graduated 2004. Like I think YouTube might have been brand new. I think MySpace was just about to start. Facebook, I think it was just for college students. But and I asked these guys once, you think we missed the boat? Like we came in right before all that. Like, and even if we didn't
Yeah.
make movies, like the Red Letter Media guys and Nostalgia Critic, like it's like we could have been the first people to do that, but we didn't know any better. We came in like right before that, and we wouldn't do it now because the internet's full of people doing that. Um,
I think like you still can, and like I see what you're saying, and I kind of feel the same way. Because even doing this podcast thing, like I started
mhm.
this a year or two ago, and I kind of feel like I was a little bit too late. And like I've asked, I'm older. You're 30.
I'm 41 actually.
Okay, I thought you said, I think you figured it out when you were 30,
I
right?
went back to school at 30.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm 42, so we're about the same age,
Okay.
and I definitely am in the same boat as you in terms of that. Then, because so much of that stuff, and it's I don't want to say that it's too late because I don't think that it is too late, but it's like I kind of feel like I missed out on the boat because I've asked friends to do the podcast now, and it's like they're all in their 40s with families. But I kind of feel like if we were in our 20s, we probably, like me and my friend, actually, my best friend did make a movie in high school, and it was with his, like, it was a total joke, but it was like with his VHS recorder,
Yep,
and
yep.
we had our friends in it, and it's like if we were just able to put that on YouTube or whatever. But now, the way that I look at things now, realistically, for me, and you were kind of saying how you had a bunch of people and it was like chaos. For me, it would just have to be like, at my age, what I'm doing now, I kind of have to do everything all like on my own almost. Like
Mhm.
my girlfriend doesn't really want to be anything, like my friends don't, unless I pay somebody, like I'm not going to get any actors. So it's kind of like I have to figure out how to do things kind of like by myself. And so if I were to make a movie, maybe I could get like one or two or three people in it, but there's no way that I would be able to make like a full on
Yeah.
production. It's too many people and too much money. But like in terms of like the equipment and stuff, like did you have your own cameras and stuff like that, or were you using the school's, like you said, 35 millimeter
Well,
and
yeah, we just used the school stuff. Yeah, but yeah, we did early digital and then actual film, which I'd be surprised if they even do that now. We did films on 16 millimeter and then 35. They had everything transferred for us, and then we'd go in and edit. Um, but yeah,
they transferred it like digitally and then
well,
you edit it,
they
or
they transferred the film to video so we could edit it, and but they never transferred it back to film. Our films only um, the way our films exist now on the DVDs we were given at graduation, basically. And I've even joked with a friend of mine, like it would be great to do some sort of fancy 4K restoration, but you kind of have to go back to the original negatives for that. And I doubt Full Sail keeps that stuff, unfortunately. Um,
so back then when you were doing it, you were kind of like dealing with I don't even really know. Like, so you guys were dealing with CDs, where now everything would just be kind of like we don't even really deal or DVDs. We
Yeah.
don't even really deal with DVDs anymore, right? Everything's kind of like would be more like just like a digital file on the computer,
Yeah, it
right?
would, or it would be like on a memory card or something like that.
Yeah,
You put it in a drive and or
yeah.
put it on the cloud and that's it. But
Another thing
yeah,
that's like kind of crazy though, in terms of even though we're kind of in a worse position as we missed the boat, we're also kind of in a good position because now you can shoot on the iPhone. Like I don't know if you know, but 28 years later was the new 28 years later that's
mhm.
coming out. It was shot on the iPhone, and the iPhone, as you probably know, has ProRes log or whatever. I don't really know how to use it, and
Steven
but
Soderbergh, Steven Soderbergh has shot films and he's his own DP. He's shot films on the iPhone. In fact, in the time we've been
yeah,
recording this, he probably shot another movie. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
um,
That's crazy with that guy. He comes like I noticed that he's coming out with Presence, that horror movie in January. I don't know if you
mhm.
know, but then he's also coming out with Black Bag, which is
Was
I
that
don't
the
know
one with Fassbender?
what. Yeah,
I
Black
need to see
Bags
the
with
trailer for that.
Fassbender and Kate Blanchett, and then the other one, Presence. I don't know if you know about that one. That's like with what's her name, Michelle Liu or whatever, the
Okay.
Asian actress, Lucy Liu. And
Oh, yeah.
it's like a horror movie all set inside like a house. And this is kind of like what I'm talking about. If I were to make something, I would want to do it like in this style where it's all set in a house, which this film is literally all set in a house. You have a family, multiple people, and then you're basically just in charge. You know what I mean? But like you said, to make like a Steven Spielberg, Quentin Tarantino, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or Steven Spielberg, like West Side Story or whatever, like yeah, you would have to have like fucking hundreds of people. There'd be no way I'd be able to do that. I could only do it if it was like
And
four or
and
five
what's I
people.
and what's ironic, well, you talk about that, I know, Robert Rodriguez wrote his book, after, talking about making his first film, and it's like use what you have. And he
Yeah,
had X, Y, and Z, and that's what he put in the film. The best great example of that, Kevin Smith. He worked at a convenience store, film at the convenience store. Uh,
yeah,
and
exactly.
uh but
Clerks is like the perfect example
yeah.
of someone doing that. And you also, before I forget real quick, you mentioned like I consider myself. I wouldn't say I'm a movie buff by any means, but I'm definitely into movies and I'm into like cinema movies. You know what I mean,
Yeah.
like high art type stuff. And I've only seen Godfather 1, and honestly, I didn't even like it. I thought it was boring. I mean, I'm kind of surprised at like how much like obviously at the time I'm sure it was great, but when I watch it now, I'm just like I'm not that into it. But I am into some like Stanley Kubrick type stuff from that era. But Godfather to me, I don't know. Like I know it's sacrilegious to say it's like overrated, but I don't know. I wasn't like too impressed with it. Like, were you super impressed with it?
I I mean, I liked it. It's definitely, it's like there are movies that I almost admire more than I enjoy. Like The Godfather isn't something I would just, and I'm sure there are people who do this, but The Godfather isn't a movie. It's like, oh, Saturday afternoon, nothing to do. I'll toss in The Godfather, to watch. But at the same time, I do hold it in high esteem, and I actually do give, some people actually think the second film is better. I actually do give an edge to the second film, but I forgot what. But we were talking about the big films, and I forgot what I was going to say, but it'll come back to me. But
Yeah,
no, I'm a
sorry.
big
I just
Kubrick.
you mentioned
Yeah.
Godfather, and I wanted
Oh, totally. Yeah.
to get that in there because I know that most people are kind of um, but yeah, you have to see it. If you don't, like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And it's like, I watched her and it's like obviously like for the time it was great. I don't know if you saw Francis Ford Coppola's new movie,
Oh boy.
and I heard that was kind of junk. So it's like I don't
Okay.
know.
And I'm half joking, but if you watch it, we might have to do another podcast just about that. I watched it. It's Coppola, um, and B, I mean, he's been trying to make this movie for decades and came close, actually. They even were filming footage in New York City, and then 9/11 happened. Um, but the movie, what did I text my friend? It's like,
9/11 happened for which movie?
oh no, he was actually about to start filming Megalopolis then.
All the way back then, and
Yeah.
that shut it down. And then for
And
some
they
reason
were,
he waited 20 years to
well, part of it
finish
was
it.
money. I mean, Coppola. he went bankrupt in the 80s and spent, many, many years making films, to try to make some money back. And then
How
he,
do you how did he
vineyard,
go bankrupt after Godfather
well,
and Apocalypse Now and all that?
he made a movie. Well, he did, trying to think. Actually, there's a book about it called Path to Paradise that was published last year, which I read recently. Um, but he, had a lot of vision and a lot of, I think his reach just exceeded his grasp. But he made a film after Apocalypse Now called One from the Heart, which is a musical. It's not a great movie. It's beautiful to look at. Some good songs in it. I think Tom Waits did the songs. Um, but he put all of his, like, he paid for it. He put all of his money into it. It was going to revolutionize cinema and all this stuff. It takes place in Vegas, and they built a replica Vegas strip on a soundstage. They didn't go to Vegas, they built it.
What
And
was it called?
One from the Heart. But the movie came out and made 10 cents.
Ugh.
And at that point, and he was borrowing from banks and, loans and all this stuff. And yeah, it all sort of just collapsed.
How did
And
he get his money back? Because he
uh,
hasn't really made a big movie since then, right?
he did, that's why he did like, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and even Godfather 3, I think he partly did, for the money, but he's got his vineyard up in Northern California, which is, that makes a lot of money. But, a lot of the movies that he made after that, he did, I think just for money, or I shouldn't say just for money, but films that maybe he wouldn't have taken otherwise.
Like
But
a
he's
Nicolas Cage type thing where he's just doing every movie just for money.
maybe not quite that. And I'm a Cage fan, by the way, too.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that he's been good, but even when he's been good, like in I kind of feel like he's overacting. Like I don't know if you saw the most recent horror one that he did, which I thought was good. Um, Long Legs. I
Oh
just,
yeah, no, I
I mean,
haven't.
don't get me wrong. Like, there's something about the grandiosity of what he's doing, but it's almost like too much. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
same with like or not Magnolia. The one where he plays like twin brothers or whatever.
Oh, adaptation.
Adaptation was like pretty just weird. You know what I
I
mean?
need to see that again because I remember not enjoying it the first time, but I haven't seen it since I rented it probably from Blockbuster. The movie of his, and it recently got a new 4K release. A movie of his that I really enjoy, Martin Scorsese's Bringing Out the Dead, where he plays a paramedic in New York, and it's like three crazy nights. And I like a good crazy night movie.
I didn't
Um,
see that. Was that like 80s or 90s
no,
or?
that was late 90s. I think that was 1999, actually.
I probably that sounds like something I would want to watch. Yeah, anything Martin Scorsese.
It's usually it might be on Paramount Plus. It's usually streaming somewhere. I really enjoy it. Um, and it's New York. It's at night, beautifully shot. Patricia Arquette's in it, and it's three crazy nights, and each night he's partnered with someone, a different EMT, and each one's kind of crazier than the last one. It's John Goodman, Ving Rhames, and Tom Sizemore. I recommend it. But Megalopolis, I texted my friend after I watched it, and it's like, on one hand, I'm glad it exists. If this was Coppola's dream, I'm glad he was able to make the dream happen. And the ending, such as it is actually kind of sweet. On the other hand, the fuck. Like,
Yeah.
wow. Some of the comparisons, like Tommy Wiseau in The Room, are not completely unfounded. There are shots that are beautiful, that you will have a shot that is like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, followed by a shot that looks like something from a PlayStation 2 game. Um, some of the actor performances are embarrassing. Adam Driver's good with what he's given. Shia LaBeouf's having a blast, and he has a moment towards the end that was the only time I laughed. It's stupid, but the one time I like laughed out loud at something in the movie was just a gag he has. Um,
Was it meant to be funny or was it
uh,
or no?
the thing I laughed at was supposed to be funny, and there are a few other bits and pieces like that, but there's some unintentionally funny stuff. There's some who thought this was a good idea. Uh, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a case of too many ideas crammed into one movie.
Yeah. What I kind of wonder is, did it come out I don't even really know, but like did it come out the way that he wanted, or did something just go off the rails and he wasn't able to do it like he wanted to? You know what I mean?
And that I don't know, but it cost I think 120 million dollars. And I remember chatting with a friend of mine like, would the movie have been better if he had made it in the 70s when he was at his prime? Maybe, I don't know. Would the movie have been better if he put 200 million dollars into it? Probably not. Yeah, maybe a few of the
I
effects would
agree.
look better, but
I mean, if you have 125 million and that's not enough, it's probably not going to be better with more. And then in this situation, how didn't he fund it himself? So I'm
yep,
just kind of like
yep.
wondering how the hell did he get himself out of bankruptcy? Because even with the movies that you mentioned, um, I just don't imagine him having that much money to be able to
Well, he
produce
has
that
his vineyard,
himself.
he has his Coppola wine brand. Uh,
And then he
and
also has his daughters who are doing like pretty well, like Gia Coppola and Sofia Coppola. I mean, they
yeah, and his movies still make money. Anytime Paramount reissues The Godfather on a new format, that's more money in the bank. And
well, that's what I was
so
saying
yeah.
before about the bankruptcy. It's kind of like, how does Godfather not just sustain his whole career forever? I mean, it's like literally the biggest movie of all time. I don't see how he
But then he
wasn't just
spent
living
it
off.
all.
He just
That's
blew
the
it
problem.
all.
He spent it all. In this book I
Yeah,
read, in fact, I even just have it. I'm in the guest room at my parents'. I'm in between traveling at the moment, but that's the book I mentioned. I have nothing to do with it. I didn't write it. I'm posing like the author. I didn't write the book though. Um,
yeah.
that explains it all. But he had big ideas, and but yeah, he put all that money he basically spent, and he would go to. I'm paraphrasing badly here, but it's like he'd go to another country and stay in a nice hotel, and he'd immediately think, I should buy this hotel. Stuff he didn't necessarily do that, but just as an example, and uh,
I
he
mean, if he could make
yeah,
money off the hotel, then I guess it would be worth it. But you know what I mean? Like if
yeah. And he wanted, he just, it's like, oh, we'll build, with his company, Zoetrope. It's like, oh, and we'll build our own school so we could train film students ourselves, and we'll buy a movie theater and renovate that so we could show our films there, and we'll buy a theater in New York so we could, you know, put on plays to just again, big ideas, but you know, uh, again, his reach exceeded his grasp.
yeah, but one thing I heard Louis C.K. saying was that
Mhm.
like when he made, and obviously this isn't really like as practical for like people like me and you because we don't have any money, or at least I don't want to speak for you, but I don't have enough money to make a real movie. But I remember Louis C.K. saying like when he was making Louis, the TV
Mhm.
show, I think stuff would I think I remember him telling the story where like I don't know if you saw that TV show, but like there's
I
a
did, I
scene,
did.
yeah, there's a scene where like he's with a girl and then like a helicopter comes
Hmm.
to like pick him up and he takes off, and he was saying like that alone cost him like a shit ton, like it might have been like $1 million or something. But he was saying he learned from Francis Ford Coppola where he's like, if he wanted to do something he would just be like, fuck it, like I'm just gonna do it, like I'm not gonna wait for approval from some big movie industry. I don't really know how he got the money, but he just kind of like did it, and then he edited it all on. Louis C.K. edited it all on his own on like
Yep.
his MacBook or whatever. And I think that's the way to. I think that is really the way to go. Like I come from originally being in like bands. So like
Hmm.
when you're in a band, you have four guys, you write music, you play music, you record. It's not that complicated. But as you said before, when it comes to movies and you have all these people, it's a way like I kind of transitioned into wanting to be a director too, not realistically, not like a Steven Spielberg, but like I said, just like a small time. But yeah, it's a whole nother you kind of come to realize it's not as easy as it looks, you know what I mean? But it's like when you're watching the movie, you're thinking, oh, this just looks like fun, but I'm sure it's like a massive headache. And I think I cut you off originally with Francis Ford Coppola before when you were talking about making those big movies like Steven Spielberg. I don't know if
Oh no, that's
um
fine.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but I remember, for a while thinking like, oh, am I a real, it's like just being into movies is fine, but for some reason I was convinced like, to call yourself a fan, you need to have seen X, Y, and Z, but it doesn't really work like that. And there's the beauty of it is there's always more movies to watch, new and old, and even so when I got my Netflix subscription, I went back and rented like a lot of, maybe I Googled the 100 best movies or the essentials or whatever. Today it would all be streaming. I have the Criterion channel, which is excellent for this stuff. So like some of the classic foreign films like Eight and a Half and Rashomon, and I rented like all of those in a row. Um, but and some are better than others. During COVID lockdown, actually, I was actually watching for a while 3 movies a day, one in the morning, lunch, afternoon, dinner, one at night, and caught up with a lot of classic films actually that way. But yeah, again, I realized I didn't quite have the temperament just dealing with hundreds of people and always having an answer and also always knowing what you want, and having something to say, which I don't. I mean, I have ideas I'd love to put on paper to do something with, and not that every story has to say something, but it's like, oh, here's an idea, and it's like, it's been done before, or it's, oh, it's not as good as this idea. And especially with comedy stuff, every now and then something will come out. Like, did you watch Arrested Development at all?
I did, and that was another one that I know was like everyone loved that I just wasn't as into as everyone. Like the humor was a little bit too like quirky and weird for me. Like
I
the
watched
rhythm of it was like really odd, kind of. You know what I mean?
It's just so fast, and disregard the Netflix seasons they did later, but the first 3 on, and I came in late to it, but that's something where I watch it and it's like, damn, it's like nothing I create will be as, like, comedy wise, it's like I can't compete with this. Like nothing I do will be as good and concise and clean and witty as this. Um,
But I don't think I see.
yeah.
I don't look at it as that as like kind of like a negative because like you can say that or you can say I'll never be as good as Spielberg or Quentin
Hmm.
Tarantino or whatever, and it's like maybe you won't, but it's like but you'll. But I feel like you can bring your own thing to the table, and it's like yeah, it might not be like as good as Arrested Development or even like Arrested Development, but it's your own spin. But then also with comedies, like you were, I don't know if you were referring to this before, but comedies aren't the same. That they like there's no American Pies anymore
No,
because
they would
I
be,
guess because of political correctiveness, or I don't really know what the reason is, but they're just not
or
as
they
like
would just be,
raunchy.
oh, I'm sorry.
They're not as like raunchy as they were anymore, right? They're the comedy
Well,
like often I,
part of it is, well, movies just cost so damn much, not even to make, but to market. So instead of making, say, a $50 million, it shouldn't even be that much, but like a studio, instead of making a $40 million teen comedy and then spending another 40 to, I guess, to market it, hoping maybe they get a couple 100 million, they'd rather spend a couple 100 million on a superhero movie in the hopes of making a billion. It's why we don't have like a lot of mid-level, mid-budget like movies anymore. It's either super small or gigantic.
but I kind of yeah, that's true. But I kind of feel like if somebody like Adam Sandler or somebody big enough wanted to make like a good comedy,
Yeah,
I feel like he like it probably would do well. I kind of
I
like
I
I don't
think so.
I'm not like totally against the whole like I'm not like making some sort of political statement because I don't really like care, but it's kind of like yeah, like I kind of feel like I don't know, like I kind of feel like if they made a big enough movie like any like of the old Adam Sandler movies again, I think that it would do well. Like I guess they are doing a Happy Gilmore too, and it's like it'll probably do well, so I don't really see why like maybe it won't do as good as a comic book movie, but I would imagine that it would still do well, right? I mean if they did it right.
I mean, you'd think so. I think he's doing it for Netflix, but he has this deal with them, and like all of his movies now are, for Netflix. But if they put Happy Gilmore 2 in theaters, I agree, it would probably do pretty well since everyone who saw it in the first time are our age, and if they have kids, they'll take their kids to see it. It'll be one of those.
Yeah.
Um, and
Or even like a super bad type
yeah,
movie or any of those old movies. Like I just don't I think that they would do well. So I'm kind of like wondering why did they just stop doing them, you know?
yeah. And I mean the PC stuff, again, I'm not an expert either. The only thing I'll say with that is I don't have the program anymore. I don't have Final Draft, so I can't read like the fragments of scripts that I wrote a million years ago. But the last time I did, I looked at it and it was like, Jesus. Like, like I'm pretty, it's like whatever works for the film. I'm not easily offended by stuff at all, but I'm reading stuff I wrote like at 17, like, okay, it was kind of a different time and, put that aside. Um,
Like, well, that's the thing is, if anything, I kind of think that I think that the political correctiveness stuff is good. I understand why they're doing it because they don't essentially want to offend people. But I kind of feel like when it comes to film or comedy, I can't, like, as long as you're not like really hyper offensive towards people, I feel like it should be fine. And I feel like Quentin Tarantino has kind of proved that, like, um, with like his movies, because like he just still does what he wants. I know he's huge, but it's like he still does what he wants. And like, Joe Rogan asked him like, what do you do when all these people come after, or when these people try and cancel you? And it's like who, like who's going to cancel me? You know what I mean? So I don't know. Like I kind of feel like if you just kept doing it, I don't know if the big industries are just like not allowing it completely, or what's going on. But
I think some of them, at least with the film business, I think it's just a case of, covering their asses in case someone gets offended by something at some point. But ultimately, like if you're a filmmaker or singer-songwriter, not it's like just tell the story you want, just, make it good. And my thing is just with punching down,
yeah,
punching up is good, punching down, not so good.
yeah,
But
I agree. Like don't go after these small groups. Just yeah, exactly. Punch up. And I'm trying to think of a recent comedy that's kind of like successfully done this recently, and I don't even know. Can you even think of any recent comedies that have really shined recently?
not,
Like,
I mean, there's so much comedy like in comedy that I don't like. And God, I mean, The Hangover was what? The Hangover was 15 years ago already.
and in my like, I'm not necessarily saying that's my favorite comedy
Yeah.
movie, but that might be the biggest comedy movie of all time, right? I mean, in terms of just how well it was done and how well it was received, like that was a what I mean, would you say that might be the biggest comedy movie of all time or not?
Maybe not all time, but definitely in the last 20 years or so. And there was a silly comedy that came out earlier this year or late last year, called, I'm pulling it up now actually. Little movie came out last year. It's called Bottoms with Rachel Sennett. It's like these girls, like lesbians in high school who start like a fight club or something. And I didn't know,
I heard of that one. Yeah.
I wasn't really expecting anything one way or the other, and I watched it and I actually thought it was pretty good. Like it's silly. It's just silly. And I like silly. So it,
I
it
feel
works
like there's
well for me.
someone else in that movie that's kind of famous, right?
Oh,
Is
Io Edib the girl from
okay, that must be who I'm
Bear.
thinking of. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah. And
couldn't
they're
really
good.
get
They're
that
funny.
into I couldn't get that into Bear either. Like I know that like a lot of people were really into Bear, but like me and my girlfriend, she ended up watching the whole thing, and I'm assuming you've watched it, right?
I think I still have 2 episodes in the most recent season to watch, but yeah, I did watch it.
Yeah, me and my girlfriend watched it, and she got to the second season where they were having like that big fight with like John Mulaney and all these other
Mhm.
people. And I was like, this seems kind of odd and weird, and I kind of like this. But in the beginning, it was just them like constantly like cooking and him being like stressed out, and I don't know, it just like nothing was really happening for me. So I kind of just stopped watching it. But in terms of comedies now, I would almost say something like Severance or like either Severance or Ted Lasso. I kind of feel like those have kind of like replaced. I don't even know if Severance would fully be considered a
Yeah.
comedy. I think
I
it
wouldn't,
is,
well,
but
Ted Lasso I don't watch, and
I
Severance
didn't
I
watch it.
watch, and it's coming back soon, but I wouldn't consider that a comedy. That's more like science fiction than anything, I
But
think.
isn't it almost kind of have a comedy edge in that they're like making fun of like I know it's not a comedy, but like they're kind of making fun of like workplace type situations. But
Well, there's a dryness
yeah.
to it, I guess. Yeah.
And I didn't watch Ted Lasso either. Didn't like it, but or what I saw of it, I didn't like. But I think that that's kind of become the new comedy. And I was kind of hoping for Apple TV Plus to really like up the game because they have the money, and I also kind of feel like they're
Mhm.
like somewhat like have higher standards, but I haven't really been too into the Apple TV Plus stuff.
Well, the one,
That almost seems a little bit too like politically correct for, you know what I mean? Like there's no, I mean, and when I say politically correct, I'm not talking about like I want them to be like saying racist things. I'm more like talking about like Pulp Fiction. You know what I mean? Like I want them to like you mentioned Pulp Fiction early on, and it's like how people tried to redo Pulp Fiction.
yeah,
I don't think Pulp Fiction has was done before Pulp Fiction, and I don't think that Pulp, and I also think that Pulp Fiction, even though it's not considered, it might not be a comedy, is very funny.
yes.
Um, but I don't think that they've been able to even closely repeat Pulp Fiction since Pulp Fiction, even Quentin Tarantino himself. Like, would you agree with that? I mean, there's like Seven Psychopaths or something like movies like that are kind of similar, but
Yeah,
it's
and
like not.
that movie I didn't like as much as I wanted to. I did
I
enjoy
didn't
it
either.
in Bruges. Did you see that one?
No, and that's also kind of is that supposed to be kind of like a Pulp Fiction type
I
thing?
wouldn't not I mean, I could see where someone would say that, but I remember watching it and that didn't occur to me, but it's very good. And
I kind
Colin
of
Farrell and Brendan Gleeson are great in it.
I heard it was good, but then I also heard the newest one by that director. What's that one called? I think
Oh,
it's almost like
Banshees,
yeah, yeah.
one
Did you
from
see
last,
that?
yeah.
Did you see that one?
It was fine. I mean, I liked it. I didn't know if it was necessarily like best picture worthy at all, but I enjoyed it, but nothing I need to see ever again.
Was that one similar to, or was that one connected to In Bruges, or was it just the
Not at
same two
all. It's
actors?
just the same guys, but it's totally
Okay,
different movie.
yeah,
Um, but no, but it's funny, like after, and I haven't seen all of them. I haven't even seen Pulp Fiction in a long time, but Quentin's also on the brain. I listened to his podcast, him and Roger Avery. And there's a time in the 90s, it's like after Pulp Fiction where you got movies like 2 Days in the Valley or Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, everyone trying to do their own take on that. And
I didn't see those, so I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't.
I
I don't even think I heard of
I
them.
didn't see Denver. I saw 2 Days in the Valley. It's fine, but it has its fans. But yeah, watching like at film school, for instance, one of our, every now and then they would show us student films that previous classes had done, and you could always tell like, oh, someone's a fan of such and such. Um, but wow, yeah. But oh, and with the comedy, with Apple TV, you mentioned the one show of theirs that I really enjoy is For All Mankind.
I didn't. I haven't seen that.
And
And
the only problem with yeah,
if something's, and I'm not saying that this is the case with this because I haven't even tried this. I don't think.
hmm
But if something's too slow for me, it's hard for
hmm
me. If it's a slow burner for the most part, but with something like I remember like True Detective season one, which I think
hmm
now is one of the best. I think Breaking Bad's the best show of all time, and not only the best show of all time, but probably trumps anything. I've said this before. It literally trumps any art. Period. And I know that's kind of extreme, but it's like I think it's better than any movie, any music, anything that I've seen or listened to ever is Breaking Bad. But True Detective season one, I would say, is probably second if you count just season one. And I
it
remember the first
was
time I
very.
watched it,
I did watch season. I watched the first two seasons, but no, season one, yeah, very very good.
I remember the first time and this is also true for like, I just recently rewatched Magnolia. And
hmm
it's like when I first watched these movies, for Magnolia, I was just too young. I was in high school. But then for True Detective season one, I remember being kind of like bored the first time I watched it. But then when I rewatched it, I was like, oh, this is just fucking amazing. Like this is perfect. But so there could be a possibility that like if I rewatch like The Godfather, I might like it more than I did the first time. But yeah, but I mean, what do you feel about like Breaking Bad? Do you think it's the best of all
I,
time, or
you know what? I hate to be that guy. I didn't watch it. I appreciate it, and I
it's
like
almost
Brian.
like it's almost like worse than saying you don't even think it's the best, so you didn't even watch it.
I mean, I like Bryan Cranston totally. I just didn't watch it, and
Why? Why?
it just didn't seem to be something that would interest me. I didn't watch Game of Thrones either.
Yeah,
Uh,
I wasn't. Game of Thrones was another one that was kind of like a slog for me. It was
but
just
I
too.
also realize I'm not a big like sword and as much of a geek as I am, I'm not the biggest sword and sorcery guy myself. I
Yeah,
even that oh, if Game of Thrones, if it took place in the future on a spaceship, I'd probably watch it. But uh, no, I just didn't want. It takes a lot for me to commit to a show. And then when I finally do, then it's like that's the one that's canceled 3 weeks later. It's like you put in all that effort for nothing. Obviously, Breaking Bad wasn't, and I could stream the whole thing, starting tonight. But maybe one day.
What
And
about
again,
Better Call Saul? I'm
fan.
assuming you didn't watch Better Call Saul if you didn't watch Breaking
Correct,
Bad,
correct.
right?
And I like him
Yeah.
too.
You like Bob Odenkirk, or
Yeah, like him.
is that
Bryan
yeah?
Cranston. And you mentioned talking about a slow burn for All Mankind. It
It
is.
seemed like that. That's why I brought it
It
up. Yeah.
does start off slow and then it picks up steam, literally. Um, I'm waiting for that one to come back. But no, it takes a lot for me to commit to a TV show. And my roommate back in LA, and we're still friends, we chat all the time. You know, trying to convince her to sit down and watch a movie, but it's like she'll have on hours of Real Housewives playing in the background, but it's like, I just want you to watch one thing for 90 minutes. And it's like, that's too much for some people, but they'll watch hours and hours of something, a TV show.
I mean, don't get that's the thing with me is it's kind of like if something's boring me, I don't really want to be bored. And it's like, for instance, an example would be like, I want to watch all the Oscar movies that are coming out. So
Mhm.
obviously, I want to see Nosferatu, I want to see The Brutalist, I want to see Anora, and then I want to see A Complete Unknown. Even though I think Timothy Chalamet in that, from what I've seen, he does not look like he's pulling off Bob Dylan. And I know that it's very hard to pull off Bob Dylan. But like with The Brutalist, I don't know if you've probably heard of The Brutalist, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So with The Brutalist, I'm glad you know about all this shit because a lot of people don't. And
I haven't seen all of them, but I know,
well, The Brutalist isn't even out yet. None of these are out. They're coming out like Christmas. But like it's probably gonna that one's probably gonna bore me. But it's 3.5 hours long. It's like Adrian Brody, going
Mhm.
coming from Europe to America or whatever. It's probably going to be bore me, but I'm still going to watch it just because it's supposed to be a masterpiece. But yeah, if something's just like too slow for me. But what's funny is like, so I'm like really picky on TV and movies, like to the point where like I just don't even have enough to watch. But like randomly, I got into like Tulsa King, which I like did not think that I was
Mhm.
gonna like be into that. But I think it's a lot of it has to do with like Sylvester Stallone playing that character is just so naturally funny to me. And then I also like the other guy from Silicon Valley,
Oh, I know who you mean.
the
Yeah.
nerdy like long hair guy. I think he's funny. So like recently I've been watching that and like me and my girlfriend have been watching Landman, and it's like those aren't my types of shows, but it's like they're on and they're not that bad. I don't know if you've watched either of those, but
I've seen bits and pieces of Tulsa King, and my brother watches it. Haven't seen Landman. Um, but I miss Silicon Valley now that you mention it. And I was on YouTube and like a clip of it just randomly showed up on my feed. It's like that and Veep. That was like my Sunday night for a while on HBO.
that and you mean you watched Veep or no?
No, I did, but that was
Oh,
like my hour routine on a Sunday night for like 5 years, Silicon
eh,
Valley and Veep.
okay. So you did watch both. The thing with Silicon Valley is I thought Silicon Valley was very good, and I even think that it's very smart and intelligent, but they would randomly go into this like almost like too goofy for me type stuff that I wasn't into. Like recently I watched a clip on YouTube where like I forgot exactly the clip, but they like randomly go into like how many dicks the audience can suck or something. And I was like I just
It's a
don't really
reference
find that
to
kind of stuff that funny. But like you
it's
know what I mean?
well, they actually make they do something very smart with that one. Someone talks about like jerking someone off,
Yeah.
and then they talk about like ways you could jerk off more people at the same time. But then in talking about that and maximizing efficiency, it helps them solve the problem that they
Yeah.
have, tech problem.
Yes. So it kind of like leads. That's what always happens. They start talking about something goofy, but then it leads to like the solution of whatever they need to like figure out or whatever.
There was a show, they brought it back like last year or the year before. It aired on Stars, but it Party Down, and that guy,
Yeah.
he was from Silicon Valley. He was in Party Down, but the first two seasons when it aired like 15 years ago when no one had Stars, you know, that's like one of my favorite as far as modern comedies. They're caterers every episode. They're at a different function. Um, Adam Scott, Ken Marino, um, Lizzie Kaplan, who I call the ex Mrs. Saslow, or the future ex Mrs. Saslow, since I have a thing for her. Um, Jane Lynch was in the first season, and then Megan Mullally in the second. But that show was a blast. And every episode, one episode they're catering at a school thing. The next episode they're catering like a porn awards after party. The next one they're catering Steve Guttenberg's birthday. He played himself. I always try to recommend that show, especially to people in LA, the people I met out there, since it speaks to a certain group of people, that show. Um, but I'm
Yeah.
trying,
I've
with
considered watching that one. I think mainly because the fact that he was in it.
mhm.
That was probably the only reason why I considered watching that one. But I haven't watched that one yet. But I might check that out now that you bring it up again.
I don't know if it's streaming, but you could, I'm sure. I think the DVD is only like $10 or something. I'm big on physical media, but yeah. So
So
film
you
school,
still buy all the DVDs and all that.
absolutely. I but I also work. Actually, good segue. I also, so with graphic design, graduated 2015 with my bachelor's. I got a job right out of school. So this is summer 2015. I got a job at a small design agency back in Boca Raton. And I realized, well, 6 months later, I quit and I went back to my retail job I had during when I was in school at the Container Store. Um, I realized just like the work environment, it wasn't quite for me. It's an quiet office. You're at your desk listening to music. I'm at my desk, and no one, I think working retail and being in school, I kind of realized like, oh, I need to work with people. I need a more collaborative environment, which is ironic because if you had told me, like in high school, like, oh, you'll get paid one day to sit in an office and just do your own thing for most of the day and you won't have to talk to anyone, I would have said, great, sign me up. And then I did it and realized, oh, maybe that was not correct. Um, so went back to my retail job, and then I read about a designer who in Australia who was designing one movie poster a day for a year. One a day, minimalist posters, real movies, and I thought, well, I could do that. So I did. I did one movie poster a day for a year. And then I decided, I always regretted leaving LA the first time. Let's go back. Moved back to LA fall of 2016. And I think even before I got my California license, I signed up at Central Casting to do background work, to start paying some bills. I think within a week of arriving, I was on set already. And
On set for what? What was it for?
Oh, well, I was on set doing background work. Um, I don't remember the show, the first one. It was canceled. I don't even remember what the hell it was, but it was at Paramount, and I was living in a part of LA. Where are you in Cal? You're in California, right? Or
Yeah,
are you in
yeah.
LA area
I'm
at all?
I'm like east, an hour east, and like if I don't know
Okay,
if you know where the Inland Empire is, to kind of like
okay, okay.
the poor part of Southern California.
I know though, but I rented a room in a house in Koreatown in LA, just off the 101, and
And
the back
when was this? How long ago was this?
oh fall of 2016.
Okay.
I just moved back to LA and had to start paying some bills, signed up with Central Casting, and they don't do background checks or anything. You just have to get there early enough and then fill out the paperwork. They take your headshot, and within a week, I was at Paramount down the street from where I was living, back on set, getting a paycheck. But a few months later, I got this 3-month internship at one of the big design agencies out there, and I learned a lot. Uh, People were nice, but it really did knock the wind out of my sails. And, my boss, he could walk the walk, like great designer, but just in terms of personality, I think we were in different universes altogether, which is difficult when you can't just like relate to someone. And so that internship ended, and I've technically been freelancing ever since. But for whatever reason, I really gravitated towards physical media, like the Criterion Collection. It's like, oh, I'd love to design for them or a label like them. And I still haven't designed for Criterion. I have a friend who has. She's working on her 10th title for them as we speak. And even at
Is that like
school,
a ton of is that like a ton of money if you get in with like a big company like that to design for them?
It can an individual release might not be tons, but if you can do it on the regular, like for instance, right now I'm working on 4 titles for Arrow Video. They're based in the UK, but they release stuff here. But they're big. It's not just one movie. Like there's all the bells and whistles and booklets and posters, and one of them is a box set. And I plan on doing another 6 month trip. I just did 6 months in the UK, and I want to do 6 months Australia, New Zealand. The 4 releases I'm working on for Arrow will pay for my accommodations for that 6 months. So that's all I'll tell you about that. But for instance, after the freelancing, or I'm sorry, after the internship, every so often I would send emails, to prospective employers, people I want to work for, and I got an email that just landed in the inbox of the right person at Arrow, and they hired me to design this box set of film noirs. So my first job for them, and they want me to design not one, not two, not three, but 4 titles and the box. And nowadays, I mostly do the inside stuff. I, lay out the booklet, the text, touch up photos. Um, Funny enough, so like Arrow just released The Great Escape, classic film. It's great if you haven't seen it. I did not do this art. An artist named Sam Hadley did this art, but everything on the inside I did, like all the, the like the booklet, touching up the photos. And this one's a little more design heavy since they wanted it to look like like a vintage World War II, kind of document, so played around with textures and stamps and, things like that. So that's where my contribution comes in with something like that.
And that's what's his name in that movie?
Steve McQueen.
Yeah, Steve McQueen. Yeah, that's a big
Well,
movie. Yeah.
yeah, it's a classic.
So
So
I mean, yeah, that's like a pretty big deal. And so you do all that in computer, right? Obviously, like you're not really doing any photography or anything. Everything is just all digitally done and on the
I mean, if I
computer.
have to do something practical, I will, like something like hand. I mean, I'm not great at drawing. Um, when I was back in school, you had to take 2 drawing classes, and those are the only classes I didn't get like a perfect, well, those are the only classes that I didn't do as well as I wish I had, since I don't have the talent for drawing like I did when I was a kid. But if there's something I have to do by hand, like a fake signature or scribbling, or, you know, just some texture, like a wall texture, I'll take the photo and load that in and use that. Um, but no, it's mostly Photoshop and Adobe InDesign. And there's an art to it, even though it's just laying out text and photos. I just bought a release from another label, and I was looking at the booklet this morning, and it's laid out horribly. And most people may not notice. It's one of those things where it's like kind of like stuff with movies. It's like you don't notice great editing, but you'll notice if it's done badly. You may not notice a beautiful shot, but you'll notice a shitty looking shot. Um, but there's an art to it. And some fonts are better than others, some colors are better than others. It depends on the film I'm working on. But, Arrow, they'll email me, hey, we're prepping a release of, say, for instance, The Great Escape. Are you interested? And in a case like that, it's like, hell yes. And then they'll send me the brief, all the extras, all the text that, has to be laid out, and all the logos and the rating and the UPC, uh, and then the booklet text, and I just go to work. And a title like that's a little bigger since it comes with some other tchotchkes inside the box. But if it's just a movie on a disc and like a short 16-page booklet, I mean, I could have a first pass in 24 hours. I've got it down to a science, and every
Yeah,
label
it's
works a little differently, but the general idea is the same. And I've worked on some cool stuff over the last several years, and I just spent yesterday sending my round of happy holiday emails. Of course, the subtext of it being, please hire me again. But I've already got 4 or 5 projects in the works, and it's not even 2025 yet. So I hope to keep this up as long as I can.
yeah, sounds good. And what kind of company is Arrow?
They're they're a boutique video label. They don't make movies, but they license movies from the studios, like The Great Escape, which is owned by MGM, and they'll restore it, remaster it, if need be. They'll produce new extras. Sort of, Criterion Collection, same thing. Criterion basically invented the concept of the special edition. And and the first ever audio commentary was recorded, for I think 40 years ago this year, actually for the King Kong Laserdisc. And you know, so and there is, and even though so many people just stream things, which is fine, and I've had people ask me, why do you still buy movies? It's like, because not everything is streaming. And if something is streaming, it doesn't mean it's streaming forever. My roommate and I literally, this time last year, we wanted to watch a movie on New Year's Eve. The clock struck midnight, and the streaming service like lost the rights to the movie because it was a new month and a new year. And it was like, where the hell did it go? Like in the span of 10 seconds. Um, but what gives me hope is vinyl. Whoever thought vinyl would make the resurgence that it did? I mean, vinyl's more popular than certainly more popular than CDs. I mean, you go to Target, they carry vinyl, they don't carry CDs. Um, so that gives me hope that that people want to physically hold something and have it, and it'll always be there. Versus having to depend on the whims of licensors and your internet connection.
Yeah, for sure. There's always that nostalgia for the past, and even though there's so much stuff moving forward, people still want, the records, or even I've even
Mhm.
heard like tapes have come back, like cassette tapes, like for music. Like some
Which that
people,
I don't quite get. I understand if it's something like that took place in that time, like a TV show that takes place in the 80s and they put a soundtrack on cassette, but like, I mean, is Taylor Swift putting her stuff out on cassette? I don't know.
I don't think she is. I think it's more of like an indie type thing. I mean,
Okay.
honestly, I don't know enough about this, but I mean, it could just be, I think it's just a nostalgia. Like when I grew up, and same with you, like you listen to stuff on tape, so it might just be like
Mhm.
that. I just want to, I mean, I don't even really know where you would listen to it, because like it's not, I don't have a tape player in the
I
car.
don't either.
But I even know with like iPods and stuff, some people still like to use like those old like iPods, just because, and I guess nostalgia reasons. But have you done any like movie posters or anything? Or is that kind of like the ultimate, the goal would be to like do
Well,
like new movie posters? Or
the goal, I mean, I'd love to do a movie poster. I've done some freelance work for the agencies, but you're usually competing with other designers and other agencies. I'd love to win a Clio award. I know a couple people who have. That's like the Oscar for movie posters and trailers and things. And you know, I'd love to have one day. It's not why I do the job, but I even told someone once. I mean, I've done a lot of smaller things, a lot of indie, micro budget indie film, things like that. It's like, I'm not the guy you get to do the Marvel poster or the DC poster or this, that's just not my style. It doesn't appeal to me.
are you
But
into those movies at all? I wanted to ask you about how you felt about those movies too.
I mean, God, it's, I haven't watched any. I'm trying to think what the last Marvel movie I watched was. It's like I'd watched them all sort of when they'd hit streaming, but then I kind of fell off because it's like the universes have become so big. It's like you need to do, it's like when you have to do homework, it's not fun anymore. And I'm not putting them down. They're entertaining. Um, but yeah, I can't even remember what the last one I watched was. I haven't seen the
Like did you see
Marvels. I haven't seen the
the
Black Panther
Batman?
yet. I like the Batman.
Yeah. So would
Yeah,
that be the last one?
probably.
Yeah. My
Uh,
friend who I originally kind of was doing this podcast with, and he's also into movies and stuff. I mean, he's into this type of stuff, but he told me the Penguin was really good. And it's like,
mhm.
I've considered, because you know how like now they're trying to do those movies, those comic book movies, almost like cinematic, like I don't know if you saw the new Superman trailer, but it's like,
I did.
when I watched it, I was kind of like, oh, this actually looks well done, but it still kind of like bothers me. But like, I kind of feel like they're trying to kind of like mix cinema with like this cheesy genre of like comic book. And like,
Well,
I don't really have anything against comic books in terms of like if other people like them, good. I don't really like them, but I feel like they're, because of what you said earlier about how all the money is going to that kind of thing, it's taking away from like what I'm into, sadly.
yeah,
But I mean, that's just the way it is, I guess. But
and but there's a way, but you mentioned like doing it like as serious cinema, but it's a comic book. But I mean, there's a way to do that right, and they did it right in the 70s with the Christopher Reeve Superman. It's on one hand a cheesy comic book movie, even before, comic book movie was a thing, but it's done on this wide, beautiful, gorgeous canvas. Like it's filmed like a mid-century classic widescreen epic American movie, and it's about a guy in blue tights who flies, and
Well,
so
exactly. It's like yeah, it's like a cinematic movie like for like kids kind of it
well,
seems like. Right?
Richard Donner, who directed it, he would use the word verisimilitude, but his thing was like, I think his rule was like, take the material seriously, just don't take yourself too seriously, which is always probably a good rule, I think.
But for me, that's the whole thing. Is it's kind of hard to take the material seriously
Right.
when the material is about, like you said, guys in spandex
Yeah.
flying through the air, And like I said, I don't really want to like hate on it because if that's your thing, that's your thing. I know a lot of people have been reading these comic books since they were kids and they know about all of them and all that, and that's fine. Like I don't, um, it's not really my thing. Same with like Toy Story is not really my thing, or like Wicked or something. But in terms of good posters that you've seen, like what are some like really good posters that you feel like stand out, or graphic design in any way?
Oh God, late. Um, there's a poster designer. She's on Instagram by the name Doirivative. Her name is Akiko Sterenberger. She is a genius. Like, and she could do it all. She's super cool. I've met her a few times in LA, and she does, alternative posters on her own. She does official posters, but just she finds a way into the material, like just that's unique. I mean, I like minimalist stuff. I like doing more with less, and that's kind of my style anyway. If I even have one, it's sort of my style is defined by my limitations. I'm not a fine artist. I can't draw or paint well. So like a lot of the classic movie posters we grew up with, the classic Star Wars and Indiana Jones, like I can't do that. I'm not Drew Struzan. Um, but the minimalist stuff, trying to, encapsulate a movie, a story in one image, like that's the challenge I like. But look up this woman, Akiko Sterenberger. She's a genius. She did it. She does great work. She just did a poster for of the Pamela Anderson movie, The Last Showgirl, and she did this thing with feathers. And I like half the time I'll look at her posters. They'll pop up on Instagram, and I'll just be like, God damn it! Like, why didn't I think of that? That's genius.
So an example of hers would be that last showgirl poster. Is there any other examples?
Uh, oh, just thinking there's well, but it's like a lot of the posters I like, they're for smaller films. They're designers who do the stuff that I look up to. Actually, the poster for Captain America Brave New World that just came out is pretty good, which has an illustrated retro vibe to it.
Did she do
Uh,
that or no?
no, she didn't do that. Uh,
I'm trying to think of some posters that like really stand out to me. For whatever reason, I don't really know why. This one I'm just thinking of is like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I thought
oh
was
yeah, yeah.
pretty good. I'm just I didn't really like the movie, but Everything Everywhere All at Once. I for some reason kind of like I think of.
hmm
So
I'm
in
just trying to
turn,
refresh my memory here on some of these. Uh, but what's funny is when I do when I'm hired to do a poster, again, it's usually small, super indie stuff. But earlier this year, I was asked to do a poster for a drama, just a straight domestic drama, and it's like that was pretty hard because it's not sci-fi, it's not horror, there's no visual hook, there's no gag, there's no horror movie. Oh, I could do something with skulls or blood or whatever, but this it's just a story about people. What do I do with that? And it turned out pretty well what but it was surprisingly difficult because there was no genre, there was no shortcut to take, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, yeah, I get that. If it's like a action movie, it's like you can have blood and all that. But if it's like a drama,
Explosions, yeah.
yeah, how do you show the drama? It's hard to do in one picture. Have you seen that movie, The Last Showgirl? I don't even know if it's like out yet. I don't know if you're able to see it.
No, I have. I'll see it eventually, but no, I haven't.
That's
Um,
actually Gia Coppola, I
yep,
think,
yep.
right?
But this
I
woman did, yeah.
I actually liked the idea of that movie, and I wanted to see. I heard that it wasn't great. I heard that like Pamela Anderson's acting wasn't great, but then obviously, I still kind of want to see it though. I like the idea of that movie. What do you think about? I mentioned the Bob Dylan movie. Like, what do you think about Timothy Chalamet? His acting on that. Like, do you think he does? I mean, I know it's probably really hard to like impersonate Bob Dylan, but it just came off like a little fake to me. Like, I'm not buying it.
You know what? I was literally about to watch the trailer earlier, and then like I got an email and got totally sidetracked by it.
So you haven't
Um,
even seen it?
Not yet. I'm so,
Yeah,
it's like, I was going to mention earlier, and I've even seen memes about this where it's like, like trying to convince someone to watch a movie or TV show, and it's like, sure, I'll add it to the list, and the list is this high. But, I find myself equally just trying to catch up with older films, almost even more so than seeking out newer ones. Like I'll see them eventually, but, there are very few movies that I'm in a rush to see. But no, I'll have to get back to you on that one, actually.
yeah,
Uh, but from what I've heard, it's like after Walk Hard, where they like parodied the whole music biopic thing. It's like, how do you do one after that? It's like the James Bond films after Austin Powers. It's why they kind of became all dark and gritty and did away with a lot of the gadgets and larger than life stuff because Austin Powers kind of, you know, took the piss out of it all. Uh,
yeah. He's already turned it into like a joke.
yeah.
So in terms of the graphic design, um, if I kind of mentioned the thing on YouTube. If I'm just doing YouTube videos, I just want to do
Yeah.
simple stuff like thumbnails and even maybe add graphic design into the videos. What's the best way for me to do that? Like I'm also working on like a low. I mean honestly, I do most of it like on my phone, like with like
Mhm.
iMovie or whatever. So do you know of any like good apps or any like information or whatever you can give me to
Well,
like do that kind of
well, as
stuff
far
to
as
learn?
doing like doing a poster or
Or like very simple like graphic design stuff, like maybe like a YouTube thumbnail, or maybe even like add in kind of like some graphic design into the video. But like I said, it would be on a very like low level scale. I'm not going to
I
be like,
know I think there's a free design app called Canva, which is probably a good place to start, like if you want to do basic thumbnails or things like that. But even thumbnails, I don't want to say there's an art to it, but I've been hired to do thumbnails, and it's like, and on one hand you think it's just a thumbnail, easy, but some, work better than others, and it's all about getting your attention. It's why when, you go on Netflix, it's like you'll have 10 different thumbnails for one movie. It's almost like tailored to what you're into. But I remember actually I freelanced for a week with this agency in LA, and I was just doing Netflix thumbnails, and they would give me feedback like it was the actual poster. It's like it's just a thumbnail that someone's going to see on their phone and it's this big, so you think who cares, but you want to get people's attention. But at the time
no, for sure, yeah. I
I
kind of feel,
showed, yeah.
I kind of feel like depending on the thumbnail, that's depending on whether the person's going to click on the video or not for YouTube. So I think that when people think that like the thumbnail isn't really that important, it's actually very important, because if people don't even like the thumbnail, they won't click on it. You know what I mean?
No, that's absolutely true. And I remember at the time on Netflix, they were streaming Black Hawk Down. And you've got an all-star cast, Josh Hartnett and Eric Bana and uh, Orlando Bloom. And it's like the thumbnail on Netflix was a shot of a helicopter. It could have just been a documentary about helicopters if you just looked at the thumbnail versus
Yeah,
this
exactly.
war movie. It's like,
Like
why?
if you don't know what the picture is that you're looking at, like you're
Yeah.
not going to click on it. You got to make it very clear of what you're trying to post in that little thumbnail. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's an art to it. There's trial and error. Um, when I do a poster for an indie film, for something small, they'll often come back to me to do thumbnails, but it's just my poster, and I'm just fitting the poster into that template. Sometimes I have to make adjustments here and there, or they might have shots of the actors where it's like take the title from the poster, but put it over this shot of the actor, and I make that look nice. Usually with this work, and I tell new clients this because sometimes they get film students who email me. They've never worked with a designer before. They don't know what to ask or what the protocol is. So, I tell them, like, I try to keep the process very simple and fun, and I don't over intellectualize it. Why this color, not that one? I mean, yeah, again, there are some colors that work better than others and colors contrasting with other ones, but sometimes it's just like I'm just scrolling through colors until I get to, oh, I like that one. Sometimes it's as simple as that, and I can't justify it at all. Uh, and every now and then a client might want to see something like, well, what about this color or this font? And I have to tell them, like, no, I'll try it, but it won't look good, and I'll tell you why, for whatever reason it is. Um, so yeah, like every
I've even heard like with fonts and like you
Mhm.
said colors. Like I don't really know too much about this at all, but I've
Mhm.
heard like some fonts are obviously just bad to use and some are good. You know what I mean? Like some you can
Well,
automatically tell are just cheesy.
well, have you seen the Papyrus sketch on SNL with Ryan Gosling?
No, what was it, papyrus or
Oh, well, no, there's a font. It's called Papyrus. It's sort of like
oh
the
yeah.
cliched, exotic, otherworld, foreign land kind of font. James Cameron used it for Avatar for the title and the subtitles, and then they did a short film on SNL with Ryan Gosling. He's in therapy, and you find out that's why he's complaining. He's like, James Cameron made Titanic. He's rich. But he used papyrus. Really? He could have paid someone to do a new font. Why? And make it a big deal out of really nothing. But for what I do, I appreciated it. And then I think, and it plays on Gosling, like, his stoic characters. Like, imagine the guy in Drive complaining about a font, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but
And I
very
think
fun.
there is like a science to it. Like
There is.
I've heard like Mr. Beast, like he has this whole science to like, the best thumbnail in his videos
Mhm.
exactly how you do the video and how long you have each clip to like keep people entertained and all that kind of stuff.
And and when I was starting out doing my daily posters, I would go to, the free websites. There's one called Da Font, just download a cool looking font and use that. And then when I look at some of those posters now, it's like, ugh, what was I thinking? But I did do a year's worth of posters, and all told, I think 1/6 of them are good, which is still like 50, 60 posters. But there was a famous graphic designer, Massimo Vignelli, and like he tried to work with as few fonts as possible. Like there were the same six or so fonts, like Helvetica, and he would just use those over and over again. And I'm trying to get more into that mode, especially for like the home video stuff I do in the booklets, because you've got pages with just walls of text. So they have to be easy to read. So I pretty much just use the same couple fonts for every project, unless it's something like The Great Escape where I could have a little more fun with it. But yeah, you know, more often than not, there's a reason why these things look the way they do. But then the problem is when you see like a logo or a poster and that maybe didn't turn out well, you have to think like, what about the 100 other rejected concepts that, they didn't like until they got to this one? And it's like, this is the one they did go with, and it's still bad. Um, but with movie posters, there's very often when people complain about movie posters, it's contractual. Why is this actor's head so big? Or the other one is if you have a poster with like two people standing on it, but then the names are reversed, it's like this person's name is over that person.
It
It's
happens.
contractual.
It
Yeah,
happens all the time, and I'm like, why? I'm kind of almost like, why do they do that? You know what I mean? Like, why do
it's
they have the
contractual. The visual composition looks better one way, but contractually, the other actor's name has to be first. You know, that's simple as that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, but like even when I'm doing my YouTube thumbnails, I try and have if I have, but I do some movie stuff where I like say
Hmm.
what movies are coming out, and I try to have the actor's name over the actor's
Hmm.
picture. So yeah, the ultimate goal would that be kind of making the movie posters?
Well, I mean, again, it would be great to make a movie poster that gets like mainstream coverage and maybe even gets an award or two. Again, that's not why I do this job.
Yeah.
Uh, the ultimate goal is actually to design something for the Criterion Collection because I haven't gotten in with them yet. I know I'm on their art director's radar because unlike so many of these other labels, with Arrow, each title gets a producer. They're in charge of that title. They hire the artist, they hire me, etc. But Criterion actually has an art director who kind of has a hand in all their titles. The other labels don't have that. So he's the guy I kind of need to get in with, and he knows I exist. I send him an email or a Twitter message every 6 months or so, and hope for the best. But
And
they're
how much do people make for those movie posters?
or for posters or for the Blu-rays and stuff, or both.
Either both, but I'm just kind of
Well,
wondering if you made like a big movie poster that goes up on the at the theater, how much would you make for that?
well, that I haven't had yet, but yeah, I mean, for when I freelance, it's a day rate. Could be like, I mean, I usually hate talking money, but for the
It's
most
fine.
part
It's
of it,
fine if you don't want to give like your personal money.
okay.
I'm kind of just asking like in general, how much people make for this type of thing.
I
Like,
mean,
is it a lot of money?
well, the agencies, I mean, there's definitely a lot of money involved, but I can't give you a specific dollar amount. But I know for some of the Blu-rays that I work on, you know, depending how big the box set is, I mean, it could be like 4 or 5 thousand bucks, and I've worked, and if I
Wow.
total up all my work, and if I take all the work because it's a little here, a little there, things have to be approved, so there's waiting involved, and I shift gears to do something else. Um, you know, I'm trying to think of one. I worked on a big box set for Arrow last year, but if I took all of the work that I did and compressed it, it's probably only a few weeks, if that. And that's like 4,000 plus bucks for a couple weeks work. But I
Wow.
also really enjoy this job. And Arrow in particular, they gave me a title to work on a box set, which will hit, next year. And I wrote back saying, "Oh, great, this will give me something to do during the holidays." And it's like, I sent the email and it's like, wait, isn't this the time to take a vacation? Like, why would I want something to work on during the holidays? That's crazy, but I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I want to, travel again soon. So again, I'm working on 4 titles for them right now, and that's going to pay for 6 months of Airbnbs down under. That's the plan.
So you're actually going to Australia for it.
Well, I did so I went to Ireland and the UK last summer for a month. I'd never been outside the United States. I went to Dublin for this design thing for a workshop for a week, and then I went to London for 2 weeks, and then I went to Edinburgh, Scotland for a week, and that was during the Fringe Festival they have. Comedy, music. It's a big cultural event there, and the streets are packed. Got COVID. I was one of the last ones to get it, but I got it. And it's like, damn, I gotta, when I was heading back to LA, it was like, damn, I gotta keep this up. I'm remote, I can work from wherever, have laptop will travel. So I put a plan into motion. My roommate took a while to come to terms with it, but it's all good now. And put my stuff in storage. And earlier this year, I relocated to back to Florida mainly for tax reasons. My folks let me crash in between things, thankfully, and so I am blessed in that way. And I did 6 months in the UK. I got back a couple months ago, and I was actually going to leave much earlier, but I had to wait for a medical thing, which thankfully is going to be resolved soon, so then I could start planning the next trip. But yeah, I just did 6 months. Yes.
Do you really even need to go anywhere? It seems like you could just do everything from wherever you are, right?
Well, I can work from wherever. That's why I want to travel. I mean, I don't have to be in LA. Um, no, I'm traveling because I want to, and sightsee during the day, and then in the evening work.
But like you don't have to. Like, yeah, you can work from wherever, but you're just choosing to travel there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I got the travel bug.
in terms of AI, are you using AI in this, or how do you feel like this is going to affect the industry, not only graphic design but also like movies in general? Do you think they're going to start using AI more and more?
I'm not. my big concern is more like AI being used in film restoration right now because I've seen, every now and then I'll see a screenshot like a weird glitch and it's like, oh, did they use AI for this? And there was a big hubbub about James Cameron using some AI process, and when tr with True Lies coming to 4K, and like so there are shots in True Lies that maybe look a little too clean, a little too smooth because of whatever process that he used. I'm not really worried about it replacing my job. If I were like a fine artist, like if I illustrated children's books, for instance, I'd be more worried. Um, but AI can't, but it has its purposes. I can't say I'm totally against it. Um, but it's like it's so bad for the environment, and it's so blatantly clear that like so many executives just want to use it to, cut out the middleman and save money, or rather so they could make more money. I, to the extent that I even use it, it's in Photoshop. When I have to, they have the like I don't type out a prompt, create a scene with such and such. But for instance, if I have a photo that's say this wide and then the booklet is this wide, I'll use it just to fill in that gap, and that's it. And now and I almost feel guilty when I do, but it does make that a little easier. And sometimes when I do posters, for like indie people, I'll do I like taglines on posters. I love a good tagline, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, things like that. So I'll go on Chat GPT and get like tagline ideas. But if I don't like them, I don't use them. Just because something's done with AI doesn't mean it's going to be good. I've used this AI powered app to, enlarge like low res photos. But if I don't like the results, I'm not going to use it and I'll try something else. Because if you zoom in, you could see the flaws. Um, but I just did a movie poster, little quirky indie romantic comedy. The main character, this girl, she brews her own beer. She has her own brewery. So on ChatGPT, I typed movie taglines for a movie for a romantic comedy where the lead female owns a brewery, and it spit out 10 taglines, which were just as good or bad as anything you'd see on a poster. My favorite was "Love ferments," but the client didn't go with that one. Um, so I will say it does have its purposes, but every other day there's just read some horror story or there was a big, at least in the design world, it was big news. One of the big design agencies is called Pentagram. They've been around forever. They have offices around the world. If I wasn't into movies, I might have moved up to New York and interned with them, because there are designers there who some of my heroes. And they just did this design project for the government where they had to come up with like 1,000+ like icons, and they didn't have the budget to hire an illustrator to design 1,000 icons. So they had one illustrator who kind of created the raw ingredients on his own, put that into AI, and then had AI spit out all the variations and things like that. And you look on their Instagram, and usually most of their Instagram posts don't get this many comments, but all the comments were like, no, not pentagram, or, shame on you, and so on. And the designer, Paula Scher, who's like one of the top graphic designers in the country, um, she was asked about it and she gave, she had to give a statement like, we didn't replace anyone. We didn't have the budget to bring on a full team of illustrators for this. We wanted to use the most efficient tools that we could with what we were given. So I could kind of see it both ways, although someone in the comments was like, well, you're the head designer. If you don't have enough money, it's your job to negotiate to get that money to hire people. And I get that, and I imagine government work has its own set of, difficulties and bureaucracy as well. But yeah, that was, like in 5 years from now, I don't know what it's going to look like, to be honest. But there'll always still be a room for the handmade, the handcrafted. Um, like this stuff isn't going away. But yeah, like if someone was starting graphic design now, you know what, I would probably still tell them to do it, and the hell with it. Or AI, it all may collapse tomorrow and every I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Like it's getting to the point where it's really good, but it's also not so good at the same time. Like I don't know if you've heard of like Sora, like OpenAI Sora.
Uh, kind
Like
Vaguely.
OpenAI is the company that makes
Yeah, yeah,
ChatGPT, and
yeah,
they made this video generator, and there's also obviously Midjourney. You probably
oh
heard of
yeah,
Midjourney, yeah. Which and I feel like the Midjourney pictures for the most part are like pretty good. Like you said, if you zoom in, you can tell like the face is like deformed
yeah.
or whatever. But with the videos, they're really good, but you can still tell that it's AI. And I know that some. I mean, I even saw like a Coca-Cola ad that used AI, and you can tell that it's AI, but it's getting to the point where it's pretty good. And I mean, I'm into it. I've used it for some of my videos and stuff like that. But like you said, I think there's still going to be room for both the authentic human made stuff and the AI. But so I wanted to get to the movies and the TV shows that you were in, and then also
Okay,
then the NASA stuff. So
okay.
I kind of probably want to try and end like around two too. So if we can cover that stuff kind of
Oh yeah,
quickly.
totally. Um, so well, I'll do the NASA thing first because I'm in my 20s, realized filmmaking wasn't the thing for me, still wanted to do something in the, kind of funny with graphic design. I'm like on the periphery of the business. Um, I'm uh so I'm at a temp job. It's 2008. My temp job, I was at a company called Simplex, and my job, I would get inbound phone calls, people who have companies with time clocks where they need to reorder time cards. There's still companies that use old school time clocks, and I would be the guy to enter in the order. That was my job. And ironically, I started just before the 2008 economic meltdown. Um, but I was working that entire time, and everyone was super nice. It was technically a temp job, but um, but I read on a tech blog about this NASA study, and I've since seen ads for it. Get paid to lay in bed, stuff like that. But I
I
read this,
remember, yeah, I remember seeing those. Yeah,
so I read this article. At the end of the article, there was a phone number. If you're interested, call whatever. I called. I left a voicemail since it was late. I got an email the next day. I read it, and it was like, let's do it. So I ended up having I forget exactly what happened next. I think I had to fill out I had to fill out a lot of paperwork, made some calls. Eventually, I flew out to Houston. I had to get a physical and a psychological exam, which I passed, thankfully. Um, and then they sent me, had to get a lot of blood work done back in Florida. And eventually, they said, we'll let you know when the next study starts. And I guess a couple months later, I just get a call in the middle of the day at my temp job. The next study starts in a week. So I had to give a week's notice at my job. And they were even ready to have me come back. But the idea was after the study, I take the money and, go somewhere, do something. So it was at the University of Texas Medical Bay in Galveston, November, December 2009. And the idea is, to observe the physical effects of long-term space flight. The closest analog to that on Earth is extended bed rest. So this whole study was 2 months. The first 2 months, it was exercises to get a baseline, and then the final 2 weeks, the same exercises so they can get a before and after. But the middle 4 weeks, you're in bed for 30 days at a -10-degree angle. I was lucky in that it's a regular hospital, 2 beds to a room, but I was the fifth guy there, and there was no sixth, so I had a hospital room to myself. Um, so again, lucked out. But so I'm in bed 30 days, -10-degree angle. I will say for a guy, having to urinate was easy. And there were bedpans, which was probably the most unpleasant part of it. All the food, it was hospital food, and it was all closely monitored, all nutritionally balanced. If you dropped a raisin, they would come back with one new raisin for you. But there's also some stuff I don't like. I don't like American cheese. I get a hamburger, I don't get cheese on it. And the first meal was a cheeseburger. And because it would have been too many carbs, no top bun. So I'm not there for an hour, and I just have this cheeseburger staring at me, so I just had to grin and bear it and, do it. But I knew all this in advance. I knew what the menu would be in advance. We toured the hospital in advance, so there was no case of buyer beware. And there were stretches that you would do and eating. It was 3 30-minute periods a day where you could be on your side or your back. When I tell people I was in bed for 30 days, they think I was just like strapped in and couldn't move. That was not the case at all. Um, there was You also had to drink a certain allotment of water every day. Um, and sometimes I would forget, so I would have an entire pitcher of water that I would have to drink basically in 10 minutes before lights out. It was lights out at 10, lights up at 6. And they wake you with music just like they do with the astronauts. And there was a common area, where we'd watch movies. So imagine 5 hospital beds all kind of lined up like at a drive-in theater or something. And there were card games, and they would encourage you, if you have a laptop, bring it. One guy brought his Xbox. One guy was learning a foreign language. I brought some books to read, and I didn't have a smartphone yet. I had my iPod, and some DVDs, although I waited until the bed rest portion was over, as a test for myself. Like, let me last through this without going through my stash of stuff. Um, but we each had our own laptop, and because you're in bed laying down, you're literally typing and looking up like this. Um, and there were some days where you had nothing to do. There were always people to talk to, and every person had a subject monitor who would kind of be stationed outside your room, had a bowel movement at this time, had dinner at this time, and so on. Um, Showering horizontally was difficult. They said you will get water in your ear, but they would transfer me onto another bed and wheel me into a shower room like the size of, say, your average bedroom. And again, you're laying down and your head's against the wall, so the faucets are, you're doing it like that. And the trick was just, yeah, try not to get water in your ear. Although I will say drying off and putting on my clothes while horizontal was difficult. Um, but everyone was super nice and friendly. And I remember a guy I went to high school with called me, and I told him what I was up to. And then he told his friends, and I could hear in the background, "He's doing what?" Followed by, "Oh, it's Saslow, of course." Um, and it paid pretty well. It paid $8,000 after taxes for 2 months. Um, but
How much? 2,000 after taxes?
no, after taxes, like 8,000.
Oh, 8,000. Wow. For how much? 2 months or 2 months?
2 months of work, I think, and I did 2 trips to Houston. One of them I had to pay for, the other one they paid for. Um, but and all the medical stuff they paid for and all that. But yeah, it was a trip. And on one hand, it probably sounds cooler than it is because, people might think like, "Oh, did you go into space?" No, I didn't. Um, but hopefully whatever was, and they've done other studies, and I don't know if they're still doing them, and I don't know if COVID put a stop to it or not, but if it helps contribute to the space program and gets us to the moon again or Mars or whatever, I could say I played at least a tiny microscopic, really microscopic part in it.
It
And then
sounds
again,
pretty
yeah,
intense.
the way our brains work, it's like you segment it. So it's like, okay, in bed for 30 days. So it's like, okay, the first 5 days, well, that's 1/6. And then 2 more days, that's a week. So you're 1/4 done already. And then 3 more days, 10 days. So you're 1/3 of the way. And eventually, before you know it, you're halfway done. But I just remember when it was time to get back up, and again, being at a -10-degree angle, there's no like blood left in your feet anymore. They put you onto this bed, and then the bed slowly rises up. And like I literally felt like I was sinking. Like I almost couldn't support myself because the blood had all rushed up to the upper half of my body over 30 days. Um, and I remember, my first upright shower, there was a nurse station outside the door. I could have fell. I could have lost my balance, but within a day I was okay. And then, yeah, with the food, some of it was fine, some of it not so fine. The beans were awful. I think that was the one thing they let me get away with not finishing because otherwise you had to finish everything. Even white milk. I don't drink white milk, but I had to for the study. Um, but uh, but no caffeine, no sugar. Someone asked me, what do you want to eat when you get home? And I said, just give me a Coca-Cola and a slice of pizza. And then when my parents picked me up at the airport, that's exactly what we did. You know, I mean, 2 months without pizza. Uh, but you wake up and eventually it's, the final 2 weeks, it's over, and it's like, well, time to go back to the airport, and that's it, and it's done. Today, again, I didn't have a smartphone yet, and a lot of this was still early. Today, I'd probably just be doing like a video thing on YouTube every day, or even multiple videos every day. At the time, I think Facebook still had their blogging feature. I think it was called Notes, and I would do that. I'd write about that, and I'm sure if I read some of it now, I'd cringe. Um, but yeah, that's how I spent my Thanksgiving and Hanukkah and Christmas in 2009, in bed in Texas for NASA.
Was there any like negative effects? Like,
The first day, or like my back almost started to hurt immediately. Or, it's like you get in bed and it's like, oh crap. But I think they gave me some Tylenol or something, and they gave me one of those cushions like to put in between my legs or something. And within a few days, my back was fine. And again, the food stuff, just had to just close my eyes, hope for the best. But no, stomach was fine. Other than the initial back issue, that was fine. But they have done longer studies. They've done 120 days in bed. That I couldn't do. 30 is my limit. Um, and there's this woman, Heather, who used to run this website called Pillow Knot. I don't know if she still does. Instead of astronaut, it's Pillow Knot. And she wrote about her experience doing it the year before. So I started corresponding with her. So by the time I started, all my questions were pretty much answered. But I was expecting the worst. I thought I'd be peeing through a catheter, but I didn't have one. It was just, here's a bottle, aim. For women, I'm sure it was a little more awkward. And there were no girls there when I started. When I left, you leave as you started. So the guys who were there when I started, they left. And then I left. And right before I left, this girl started. So I was upright and she was in bed, and I'd hang out and, chat with her now and then. And the nurses some were nicer than others. One nurse was really cute. And it's like, I'd ask you for a cup of coffee, but can't move, But time well spent. And at my high school reunion, because they asked us, oh, we're doing a little booklet, list, what you've been up to, what your job is. And I mentioned that, and a few people came up to me at that, like, so NASA study, huh? Um, but yeah, I don't think I could do it again, but I'm glad I did. And the money helped too.
yeah, are they still doing that? Like, if you want to do it today, not you,
I
but
want
if anybody.
I'm honestly not sure. I want to say they are. And again, I don't know if COVID put a stop to it. I haven't seen any of those ads lately. NASA will pay you. I haven't seen that. But I'd like to think if they're not doing them now, that they'll pick them up again soon. Um, yeah, I hate to think they just stopped cold, but we'll.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, like I said, I remember my girlfriend, fiance now, seeing that. I think this may have been around about probably about 10 years ago, seeing that
Okay.
and being like, "Oh, you should do that. Like, you would like doing that." Because I like sleep. I like to sleep. I sleep a lot.
Well,
So I
that's
think
the
that's
thing.
that's the perfect job for you. Yeah.
No, that's the thing. No napping.
You can't sleep at all.
Well, I mean, you go to bed at 10, up at 6, but no
Yeah,
napping during the day. And if they think you're napping, they'll wake you. You'll get the nudge.
yeah.
No
And
napping.
and you can't even take a shower. They don't even let you get up to take a shower. Like, you literally have to stay in that spot even to take a shower.
Well, they'll wheel you into another room and put you on like a waterproof something or other. But yeah, you're still horizontal while you're showering.
Yeah, like you
Of course, I
can't you
think we're
can't
every other day.
you can't get up at all for the 30-day period.
Correct.
Okay. So yeah, then the being in the movies, was that when you were in LA and the TV shows?
Yeah. So in LA, yeah, there are a
And
lot
then
different.
also the PA stuff too, I guess, if you want to go over that too, like how that was.
Uh,
I mean, unless it's too long, then we could just cover
well,
that.
that we could save for the future. But
Yeah.
well, I did some extra work briefly when I lived in LA the first time around after film school. One of my roommates told me about it. Um, Pretty cool, And then when I got back to LA when I moved back in 2016 after my design degree, yeah, the first thing I did was go to Central Casting. They're like the biggest agency, that does background. And now a lot of it's done via text. It used to be that you had to call in, and sometimes you could call 100 times before you got someone, you know. Um, it's a little more efficient now, but it's an interesting job. It's an interesting way to make money. And I've met so many cool, fun, creative people. I've also met some goddamn weirdos. They don't really do background checks or anything. As long as you can show up on time and follow directions and not be a dick, that's pretty much the criteria. And, I got to work on Grey's Anatomy and Superstore and uh or I did a week on Ford versus Ferrari. You'll never see me in the movie. I was a pit crew, and that was a week. But
When did that come out? Like that was pretty recent, wasn't it?
like a couple years ago, yeah. But they built like the grandstand or whatever, and a lot of it, the rest they filled in with visual effects, and there were people dressed up who had to be in the sun all day who were spectators. We got to be in the shade. We were pit crew, and on a big production like that, it's so chaotic, and there are never enough PAs or assistant directors, and some of us we just hang out, and often and you see a lot of the same people when you do this job. So it's almost like starting a new grade in school where it's like, oh, cool, I get to be in class with so and so again. You get to, I'm reporting to work for young Sheldon because they need people for the church scenes. And it's like, oh, cool, my background friends. Um, but there are days that are less than pleasant. And I realize this is all first world. It's a privilege to do this, but there are days where they're filming winter scenes in the summer. I did an episode of Scandal and it's a presidential inauguration. Inaugurations are in January, but we're filming in July. So we're all dressed for winter in Washington, in LA in July. My pea coat and scarf and everything. And you just got to stay hydrated. And I just kind of zone out. Like I'll just pick a spot in the background and stare and zone out until they call action. Um, and I'm not starstruck. Like I did a day on that Netflix movie Bright, not very good, but I look up and it's like, oh, there's Will Smith, and he's breathing the same air I'm breathing. Pretty cool. But I'm such a big geek. Like if there's a behind the scenes person, like a cameraman or something, it's like, oh my God, that's the guy who shot whatever. Actually, I did a week on Call of the Wild. Actually saw Harrison Ford. I think it was his last day, and he's throwing a ball to the guy in the motion capture suit, Terry Notary, who's playing the role of the dog. So it's Harrison Ford and another guy playing the dog. Um, but we get to set, and it's just like, who's the crazy guy yelling? And it's like, oh, it's Spielberg's cinematographer, Janusz Kaminski. He's filming this movie, and I'm telling a couple people like that's Spielberg's DP, and it's like they couldn't give a shit. Because a lot of people who do background, it's just a job. They're not necessarily into movies or TV shows, but then there are people that are, and you meet a lot of people where it's like that's the thing with just LA and that business in general. Like everyone has a side gig. We're all background, we're all the lowest on the totem pole, but he's a filmmaker, she's a writer, he's a musician, and there's a great let's put on a show kind of vibe to it that I really enjoy. And if you're lucky, the food's great too. I've had, Superstore had great catering. Um, and that's the thing. Like if you do background work consistently, it's like you rarely have to go to the supermarket. If you get there early, they often have breakfast for you. Sometimes they have it divided between the crew and background, or between the union and non-union. And I'm not in the union. I'm eligible, but I'm not in it. Um, but sometimes it's, when it's really good, it's like the whole spread, your bacon, your eggs, your this, your that. Lunch, it's like, oh, do you want, we're having steak today. Great. And just the communal atmosphere to it that I really enjoy at its best, where you feel like even though you're just background on the Big Bang Theory, um, it's fun. It can be fun. And with sitcoms, it's like on shoot night with the audience, even though they're not looking at you, they send you in, there's the music playing, the warm-up comedian, and people are there to have a good time. And I know there's just I like the vibe. Um, and yeah, movies, did a week on uh Call of the Wild, did a week on Ford Ferrari. Oh, I did 2 nights on Blonde, the Marilyn Monroe movie. And I'm when they're doing the subway grate scene with the air blowing up, I'm the one who's closest to her, gawking at her. And they even took a still from that movie, and it's on the back of the soundtrack album. So if you get the blonde vinyl soundtrack, you'll see me staring at Anna de Armas. I'm the guy not wearing a hat.
I'll have to check that out. I actually wanted to see that movie, then it got bad reviews, and so I
It's
ended up not watching it. But like I thought I would like it.
She's lovely, and the movie itself is thoroughly unpleasant, I found. I mean, I'm not a Marilyn Monroe expert at all, but by the end, it's like you just want to give her a hug.
Like why by implicit you mean it was bad, or it was just you just kind of like feel sorry for her?
I mean, you feel bad for her, and like I don't want to say it's exploitive. I mean, I watched it once a couple years ago and I haven't had an urge to revisit it, but it's just such a dark, miserable movie. It's well shot, it's well acted. Again, she's lovely in it, but it could have, I mean, and I think it's based on a book. It's like, okay, what shitty thing can happen to her now? You know,
Just one bad thing after another.
kind of, sort of. Again, I haven't seen it since it dropped on Netflix, but at the time, I actually, because on Facebook, I would take screenshots of myself and post them, for the family to look at. And someone asked me how the movie was, and I said the same thing I said to you. And one guy was like, "Wow, you got to stare at Anna de Armas all night, and you still gave it a bad review." Wow. But it's not her fault. And that's the thing. You can't, as background, you can't really talk to actors. I mean, if they say hi to you, you can say hi back, but you can't just go up and be like, "So Harrison, Star Wars, right?" No.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've met a lot of cool people on that job and a couple of nut jobs too. Um, but yeah, interesting way to make money. So at the beginning, it's like I would do 12 hours on set, get home and do some design work for another, 4 hours or something. And with the background work, there were no days that were horrible. Well, maybe one or two, but for the most part, it would at least be okay. So I could at least, when I'm going to bed, my head hits the pillow and I could at least say to myself, you know what? Tomorrow will be okay. It may not be great, but it'll be okay. And, that counts for a lot.
Yeah, I would imagine the hardest part, but it seems like I said before, like it seems like making movies would just be fun, and I'm like interested in what's going on like behind the scenes and all that. But like I would imagine, I don't really know what the hardest part is, but I would think that the hardest part might be like I've heard there's like a lot of waiting, like you got to like sit around and wait for like 12 hours for your scene,
There,
and
there was one, we could end it on this. I did an episode of The Mandalorian, actually. I think it's the first one where Rosario Dawson shows up. And Michael Biehn is in the episode, but I didn't get to see any of these people. I think our footage was just used as a background for when the actors are in front of a blue screen or something, and we're the background. But I did one scene in the morning, went back to, it's called background holding, went back to holding, read an entire book, and then at night, time for our next scene. So like 10 hours passed while they were filming other stuff. So it is a lot of sitting around and waiting and a lot of hurry up and wait, but you're paid and it's
that's
minimum
what's
wage.
weird. It's kind of like
And
weird because it's like you're being paid for that period, so it's like
yeah,
really it's not that bad. But you would almost think that they would just be like, go home, come back in like 10 hours or whatever. Is it just that they don't know like when it's gonna start, so they need
they
you
don't
there?
they don't know, and it's worth it. It's more efficient to keep you there. They're not going to send people home. Not, especially if you're in costume or makeup, and they're not going to have you get changed and then come back and change again. And they don't
Yeah.
know. Schedules change all the time. And people ask me, what does that pay? It's minimum wage, but it's a minimum of 8 hours. So if you work for 8 minutes, you get paid for 8 hours.
And would
So
you be able, do any of the people do it like full time? Like, would you be
yeah,
able to do that full time?
it it's a trick. It's not impossible. I mean, at the most, I mean, I was averaging 3 or 4 days a week. I think there was one instance where I did 7 days in a row. There was one instance where I actually did two jobs in one day. I did Young Sheldon in the morning, that wrapped at noon, and then there was a rush call for something at like 4 in the afternoon. Thankfully, it was at Paramount right down the street from where I was living, so I actually did two in one day. Um, I was out of it the next day, but it's not impossible, you know. But I can see also where it might get old after a while, but I'm actually visiting LA soon for a few days, and I'm gonna have breakfast with a friend of mine who I met on set. And on one hand, we're both like, yeah, we did it, it's over, it's done. And then by the time we were done with breakfast, it's like, but I miss it. I'd love to do it again one more time. So
Yeah.
totally do it again.
Yeah, I'm like very interested in what goes on behind the scenes and stuff like that. Was there anything crazy that you saw, like any crazy situations with famous actors, like the Christian Bale like blow up type scene or anything like that?
No, I
Or is it
never.
mostly like they just kind of come in, do their job, and then leave, and like you're not even supposed to like. I've heard with some celebrities like you're not even supposed to like look at them or talk to them and stuff.
I didn't get any of that, but no, I didn't see any blow ups. And Christian Bale, that was always like the example that was used.
Yeah. Or
Um,
Tom Cruise, I feel like, or is it Tom Cruise?
well, that was during COVID, where someone I think was
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
not masking or doing
For
something.
Top Gun, I think Top Gun 2. Yeah.
But uh, but no, never witnessed any blow ups. And again, and yeah, some actors and some trying to I'm trying to think of any instance where uh, again, I mean, they're there. I mean, if they might, if they look at you, you can. I never got the don't look at them. I never got that. And every now and then one might pass by and say hi or how you doing, and it's like, hey, what's up? And I think, oh, what was the show? Oh, was it Matt LeBlanc who was on this show called Man with a Plan? It was a sitcom.
Was it
Um,
like about his? Wasn't like a reality show about him or
no,
something, or like not
no,
reality, but he was playing himself.
or he wasn't playing himself, but no, he was a guy in a sitcom, Man with a Plan. It ran for a few years, and it's funny. I played college student the first time around in LA. This time they booked me, and they're like, "Okay, you're parent at PTA meeting," and I'm like, "I'm what now?" I'm playing a parent now. But we're just standing around. At one point, he just came up and asked how we were doing. Cool. How are you? Just normal. Um, and all the, a lot of behind the scenes folks, because, when you're an extra, you interact mostly with the PAs and there's the first AD and then the second AD and sometimes the second AD. And some of them know everything and they know all your names and they know exactly what they want. You start there, count to three, move to there, count to two, move to there. Others, it's a little more winging it, or sometimes there's not enough time and you don't even get told. I mean, there are at least a couple instances where I just had to do it myself. Like, you know what? I'm gonna walk there. No one told me to do it, but I see where the camera is. That's what I'm gonna do. Uh,
I'm gonna improvise, like start acting a little.
well, but every now and then, when they have like crowd shots and things, sometimes I'd get a close up, and my parents would always ask, why you? Like, why you're close? It's like, I don't know. I was there. Or, I was listening, so I knew where the camera would be. I don't know. So yeah, but the funnest job I ever had was an episode of Superstore. They did a Black Friday shopping episode, and and you've seen the footage, I'm sure. So it was just, the doors will open. There were stunt people who fall, like, and we can't step on them, but like the stunt people, they're banging against the doors collapse, the stunt people fall to the floor, and we just kind of have to get around them. And then it's just like pick a spot and run. So we just got to act crazy all day. And when I was playing it back for screenshots, I sent some to my parents, and they're like, "Why are you smiling?" It's like, I'm just having that much fun. But yeah, just running around like a crazy person on set and getting paid for it. Not to mention just being on a movie studio lot. Oh, it's filming at Warner Brothers, and park here and check in there, and you'll get a pass. And you see the tours, like at Universal, they still have the tram tour, and all I could think is they're paying to be here. I'm getting paid to be here. It's a privilege, but it's just walking. It's cool, but it's not like in the movies. Like, have you seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
I think a long time ago.
Okay,
I
but
don't
like
really remember it.
any movie where like a character goes onto a studio lot and it's just bustling with energy and activity, and oh, knights in shining armor and flapper girls and cowboys, like I show up at Warner Brothers in the middle of the day and it's like, and it smells like a hardware store because there's a set being built and that's it. I see carpenters and electricians. It's not quite like it as glamorous as it is in the movies. Um, but it's still just pretty cool, and it beats doing the cubicle thing.
Is that where all of it was done? Was pretty much Universal Studios or that
Well, no,
area?
I actually tallied it once the best I could. About 50-50 studios and location work. A lot of Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount, some stuff at Fox and Sony. Um, but yeah, Warner Brothers and Universal and Paramount were always the easiest for me because they were always the closest to where I lived. And every now and then you'd be on location, sometimes very far away, where you have to get up at 3:30 in the morning to be on set at 5 o'clock, like over in Ontario or something, or Pomona. Um, and then there's traffic sometimes you have to deal with, so you leave early anyway. I mean, you would know that. And
I live that way, but like further, if you keep
yeah,
going, like Ontario, but further.
no, I know, but like if
Yeah.
you have to be on set at 9 o'clock, you're not leaving at 8 o'clock. A lot of downtown stuff, which I usually didn't like because no matter how hard they try, like if they're, they're like, okay, walk down the street. And I'm always turning my head because when they yell cut, you can't hear it. There's a city, you can't hear the 18-year-old PA, or maybe not 18, like the 20-year-old PA who's, in film school yell cut, so yeah, very often it's like just doing that.
And then are you doing any directing? I know you're not making any movies, but like are you doing anything at all with the camera or even um I would say acting, but you're probably not doing any acting. So like are you doing anything like photography or videography or anything like that? Or is it just all
Oh,
graphic design now?
pretty much all graphic design. I mean, on one hand, it's like there's so much I want to try and do, it becomes almost a burden. And then at the same time, it's like that the conflict between trying to be the best in my field versus trying a new field, because there are only so many hours in the day. Plus, I try to watch a movie or two now and then and read. You get a lot of reading done on set, that's for sure. But other than, trying to take some decent travel photos, it's pretty much graphic design. But I got to come up with with a poster for next year. You know, I'm still doing the alternative movie posters, and I always try to start the new year with a bang. And then what happens is a bunch of us designers online, because it's actually a nice close community. Um, for the best picture nominees, we do posters for that. And I kind of dread it every year. So in another few weeks, I got to start psyching myself up for that. But yeah, posters and I writing. That's the creative thing I want to start dabbling in again. But you know, I don't want to buy the notebook and write for a page a day, and then after a week, it's like, done. It's happened before, so
Yeah.
it's tough.
Do you have like a good camera or did you ever have a good camera like when you were directing or were you
I
always
had
just
it.
using?
Well, that was just film school stuff. I mean, I had a digital SLR for a while. Um, but I actually sold it, a couple years ago. But it was actually a pretty good camera, but that's pretty much it. I mean, I could buy one. Um,
But you don't have one anymore?
not right
No.
now.
And then you mentioned earlier on shoot when you guys were shooting in like 16 millimeter or 35 or
Yeah.
whatever. I've always kind of like I don't know that much about film,
Mhm.
and I've always wondered what does the millimeter mean? Like exactly, is it just how it's like how thick or how long or something
Yeah,
the
pretty
film
much.
is?
Yeah,
So
pretty
like
much.
what would be the difference between like when you hear directors are like Quentin Tarantino will be like I shot in 55 or 35 or whatever,
Well, it
like
would
what's
be
the
well, like
difference?
it's just the negative area. It's bigger. It's bigger. So like, yeah, he do Hateful Eight, like he did it in 65 millimeter. It's just
Yeah.
bigger and sharper and more clarity. Like when Christopher Nolan, it's the difference between shooting Oppenheimer in 16 millimeter, where it would look like one of Kevin Smith's early films, versus an IMAX, where it looks like an IMAX movie. It's why
So
some films
it's
are grainier than others. And
so a 16 might be like more of like an indie grainy like grainy indie
yeah,
thing,
like
whereas a
Chasing
bigger
Amy,
one will just be a bigger, yeah.
well, I think Chasing Amy he did in 16. Um, and a lot of it's just dictated by budget. I'm sure there are filmmakers who just appreciate the aesthetic qualities. They like the grainier texture versus whatever. But yet, Christopher Nolan, for instance, he loves his IMAX. He just wants the biggest, most detailed image possible. And then the bigger it is, the more you can kind of tinker with it and reduce it and this and that. Um, yeah,
And
it can.
it's almost harder to film in with film, right? Than it is with digital, or would you say it's
It it's well, digital's more convenient. but at the same time, it also has its own host of problems and issues. And there's a podcast I listen to, Team Deakins, and it's the cinematographer Roger Deakins, 1917, Blade Runner, 2049, Shawshank Redemption, Fargo,
Doesn't he
genius.
do Quentin Tarantino's too, or no?
Uh, uh, no, although
No. Okay.
Tarantino's last few movies I think were filmed by Robert Richardson, who also did a lot of Oliver Stone's best films too. But
Okay.
Team Deakins, they interview people in the industry, and anytime they talk about digital versus film, they both have their pros and cons. Um, you know, and yeah, digital can look as good as film. And yeah, with film, the actual film magazine that goes on the camera, you can only hold it can only hold so much film. You could only do X number of minutes before you have to change out the magazine, and then you have developing and all that. You don't have to do that with digital, and you could just do endless takes until you run out of memory, I guess. But then, digital has its own issues, equipment and being calibrated properly, and color space, and things like that. And every now and then someone would tell some horror story like, oh, this it didn't look good and we couldn't figure out why. And yeah, there was something wrong with the sensor or something like that, or it was in the wrong color space. And Deacons would always say like, and they said digital would be easier, but it's just a new set of problems.
Yeah. Do you know anything about like because I'm currently wanting to get in shooting in log. Do you know
Mhm.
anything about like the current stuff, like ProRes log and all that kind of
Not
stuff? No.
not really. Only when
Okay.
I do posters, when they send me screenshots, I tell them just send it to me in the highest resolution you can. Like
Yeah.
export it directly from Final Cut or whatever program you're using. Like if you send me a YouTube link or a Vimeo link, like my screenshot won't look as good as what yours will look like from the source.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then sometimes they'll ask me, do you want the color corrected one or not? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, because I could do my own color correction on my end, but it may not look as good as like a professional color, person who does that for a living. But
What do you use for the color correction?
no, I just go in on Photoshop and just kind of futz with it,
Okay.
to be honest.
Because I'm wanting to get because now I don't know if you know, but the new iPhones have they call it like ProRes log, so it's essentially
Mhm.
just like raw or whatever. But then you have to color correct it or color grade it, and
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
just my computer's not that good, and I don't have like a good editing process, so like I haven't really
Well,
fucked with it.
Adobe has their Camera Raw app you would use something like that, and then you
Yeah,
can adjust every individual, setting.
on the iPhone they have like an app.
Well, I know they do for, I don't know if they have I'm sure there are other apps. I don't know if they have that one specifically for the iPhone. I know Adobe makes stuff for at least the iPad.
Yeah, they have the Premiere Pro
Yeah.
video editor, but yeah, I wanted to get into that, but I mean, it gets pretty complicated with the color correction and the color grading. Like it's that part of it's
It
not that
can,
easy.
I mean, if you have to, it can add up, it's like when you can adjust everything, it can be a bit of a burden. And often, like with the Blu-rays that I do, like I'm working on some titles right now, a lot of the photos are in black and white. I'll clean them up and make them look nice. The color ones, I used to be much more hands-on, when I was starting out, but now it's like I tend to lean, I don't do that as much. Like Arrow actually put out a Mallrats. They put out a Blu-ray of Mallrats a few years ago, and they sent me all these photos, and I'm fixing them. And when I look back on them now, it's like I bumped up the contrast way too much. You're losing fine detail. So when it was time to do the 4K release of Mallrats, I took the photos and kind of fixed them up a little bit, but that's something you kind of learn as you go. You have to
So
see it.
you are doing color correcting. Are you doing color grading on the photos?
No, well, I'm kind of using it as all as one term, but like if I get a color photo, it's like someone who restores family photos for a living. If I get a faded color photo, I mean, I'll try to bring the color back into it, but you could also risk going too far. That's the problem.
And you're doing it all with photos as opposed to video, right? Like you don't really work with video at all, right?
Correct. I've done some titles. Like there's a guy I work for where he'll take like an old movie trailer, but he'll take the restored footage and redo the trailer. So the trailer uses the restored footage, and then I'll have to recreate like the title and the billing block with all the credits and the logos. So I'll do that, and then he could put that on the new footage. But yeah, I don't really. do much in terms of video. That might change at some point, though.
Yeah. Because yeah, then on top of it, like the file sizes for the ProRes log are like really high, and
I'll
but
bet.
at one point I want to get in more into that, because I'm not very good with like color correcting or color grading really at all. I haven't really, mainly because my computer's not good enough to do like big files. But so anyways, so yeah, so we'll wrap it up. If you have any, like, where can we find you? Your website? I don't know if you have a podcast or YouTube
Oh,
or whatever, but
I don't have my own, but I enjoy appearing on other people's podcasts when I can. I'm at scottsaslow.com, SCOTTSASLOW, and I can be contacted through there. My socials are on there, Instagram and Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky as well, and it's just on one hand, I enjoy it and it's cool to interact with people. On the other hand, I hate all of it, but it's kind of necessary for when you freelance.
all of Blue Sky, or just all of social media in
Oh, no,
general?
all of it. But
Yeah,
I've gotten half my jobs from social media and people who see my
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you hate it, but you kind of have to use it to network or whatever. All right, and then lastly, I always ask, are there any like movies, music, podcasts, really anything you can think of, even books or whatever, that you're into? I asked mainly just because I'm always looking for new podcasts, movies.
Um, well, I mentioned the Team Deacons podcast. There's video archives, Quentin's podcast I listen to. Um, it's a shame I started listening to Gilbert Gottfried's podcast and then he passed away like 6 months later. But there's some great interviews on that. They have the back catalog up. Books, I recently read the one on Coppola, Path to Paradise. I just read The Astronaut Chris Hadfield, who I think he spent more time in space than anyone, but he's a novelist. He a Cold War space program, I guess what you'd call a dad book, and he just did one called The Defector. I read that recently. Um, Read a book on the director Michael Cimino, who did Heaven's Gate and Deer Hunter. Um, yeah, and as far as movies, I can't say I recommend Megalopolis. It's more of just a bizarre curiosity than anything else.
I
Uh,
do, I do want, I actually kind of want to see it in the theater, but I just didn't get
okay.
around to it.
But yeah, and as far as one podcast I will recommend, even though it ended a couple years ago, when I was taking improv classes in LA, someone asked favorite podcast, and this one guy said, "My dad wrote a porno. It's a podcast." And I started listening to it and was a fan in 5 minutes. The short it's British, these three friends from university. One of them, this guy, his dad, like self-published some amateur erotica, shows it to his son. The son is horrified. The son gets together with his two friends. They start reading it. So every episode is a chapter where this guy reads from his dad's amateur porn.
Wow.
I've almost crashed my car from laughing. It is a riot.
I listen to so many podcasts because I'm driving all the time, and it's like hard to find good ones, you know what I mean? But it's all kind of like, for the most part, a lot of it's just like DIY. and
Yeah.
um and then I haven't really listened to much of Quentin Tarantino's and Roger Avary's video archives, but I've heard, and from what I've heard from him, a lot of it is like really kind of like hard to follow kind of stuff, because they're talking about movies that like I haven't seen, and like
Not
older style movies.
I mean, it's not really hard to follow, which was my fear that the stuff they would pick would be so esoteric and obscure. But I mean, they've talked about stuff I've seen. They actually just did, they talked about this movie. I mean, nothing new and recent, but they've talked about a few movies I've seen. They just talked about the 1970s version of The Big Sleep with Robert Mitchum, which I've seen. They just talked about Narrow Margin, which I think is from 1990. They just talked about Herbie the Love Bug, the old Disney movie.
See,
So it
like
is
I haven't seen like
obscure
it. I
stuff.
haven't seen like, even though those probably aren't like obscure, like I just haven't seen them.
I got
So
you.
like when
But
they're
it's
talking
not
about
hard
movies,
to. Well, what they do is they'll read because like Quentin has all the old videos from the store that they used to work at. So they'll
yeah.
like read the synopsis from the box before, so you at least have an idea of what the movie is and who's in it. But then there's others they've talked about that I've never seen, most of them. But every now and then they talk about one I haven't seen, and it's like, shit, that sounds pretty cool. I gotta remember that one. you
Yeah.
know.
And then do you feel like there's like a best way to view things? Like do you feel like VHS is better than DVD or DVD is better than
I'm
streaming? I know you said it sounds like DVD for you, right?
well, I'm 4K. I've upgraded. Um, so I do 4K. I haven't upgraded everything. I won't upgrade everything, but I'm not an early adopter. Like I'm not the first one online and at the Apple Store when they do a new phone. But if it's like a favorite movie of mine, I'll try to see it in the best available format.
What do you
And
mean by 4K? Like 4K streaming or 4K DVD or
no, the actual 4K discs.
like the 4K DVD, like Blu-ray or whatever?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
okay.
Well, there's DVD and then upgrade DVD, from DVD to Blu-ray, and now there's 4K, which is like twice as is it twice? Um,
Oh, so there's
4K, which
4K
is
DVDs that they've added in and they weren't there before. Is that I don't really
well,
know.
4K is sort of the successor to Blu-ray. It's the resolution, the color space.
Okay.
I'm not an expert, but like the first 4K title I watched, like I could tell the difference. Like just the colors just pop when it's done well. Um,
So
but
when they originally released them on DVD or even Blu-ray, what resolution were they at? Like 720 or something? Or
yeah, well, Blu-ray I think is 19 yeah, Blu-ray resolution is 1920 by 1080. I think DVD is 720. 4K resolution I think is 2160 by or 3840 by 2160. And I remember at film school, um, my friend and I we were genuinely wondering, like, well, how much better could an older film look? Like Citizen Kane, 1941, how much better could Citizen Kane look? But you know what? If the transfer's done well and the materials are in good condition, yes, even an older film can look like $1 million on 4K. Um, I watched there's a famous film from the 40s, Technicolor, The Red Shoes, Criterion. It was their first 4K, that and Citizen Kane. And I swear there's a shot or two in the red shoes that looked like the movie could have been made yesterday.
do you have any idea what the resolution was for like Citizen Kane, or would it not even like really be
Well, film
resolution?
resolution is still the best. Like an actual
Oh, is it?
film negative is still superior.
It's
Uh,
actually still better than like even
yes,
4K.
yes.
Oh, okay. That's kind
But
of crazy.
and ironically, a lot of the earlier digitally filmed movies, like at 2K or something, like really can't look much better. Like the Superman Returns or a couple of the Star Wars prequels, like they're almost kind of like they'll never look better because they were limited by the early digital, formats that they used. But something like Citizen Kane or even The Great Escape, that's a 4K. It looks as good as it will ever look. I mean, there are some purists like Quentin who almost they talk about this on the podcast because they watch a lot of these films on VHS. They prefer the VHS almost just because it has that older, lower res look,
That like
which
flick, kind of like a flicker to it, right?
yeah, like not every movie needs to look all shiny and glossy and perfect, but again, when it's done well, um, yeah, it can look beautiful, you know.
So
So yeah,
do you watch all everything on DVD 4K, or do you ever stream
well,
stuff?
not everything is available on 4K. The studios, I guess they're working their way through their catalogs doing new transfers of everything, but not everything is available on 4K. And even if it is, it's still no guarantee it will look great because there's other digital tinkering, noise reduction, the AI stuff, um, where it may not look as good as it can look. That's why I say when it's done well, but most of the time it is. Um, and often, they go back to the original negative, which often historically I think wasn't always done when they do these new transfers, because the more removed you are from the original negative, then it's not going to look as good. But if something's available in 4K, I'll watch it. But no, most movies still aren't. I mean, hell, there's still plenty of movies that were only put on VHS that haven't made it to DVD or Blu-ray or anything.
Do you ever watch VHS anymore?
No, I don't.
No.
I haven't owned a VCR in years. I have a friend who still
That
does.
would be like really aged. Like,
Well, a friend of mine, we went to this VHS like swap meet thing in Burbank, and I'm waiting for her. This guy walks out with a VHS copy of John Carpenter's They Live, and all I could think is, you're gonna watch John Carpenter and pan and scan. Are you out of your mind? So I could kind of see it a little bit. Like, I'm not into that retro VHS collecting at all.
Yeah, there's something about like the nostalgia, like I said before, about watching it on that. I mean, I probably wouldn't do it either. But yeah, I mean we've been at like 4K for a while, and I'm kind of like, are we ever gonna like make the jump to 8K? 8K, you know what I
I
mean?
mean, I'm sure there'll be like an 8K displays at some point, but like home video wise, I mean, this might be it. I don't see it'll get to the point where like the human eye can't perceive the difference anyway,
Yeah.
unless you have the perfect screen. And even then, but
Y-
so I'm not even worried about it.
Yeah, like my TV's, I don't know if, I mean, I've had it for a while. I don't know if it's 720 or 1080, but they had
Mhm.
4K when I bought it like 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And I mean, I have a hard time noticing the difference, but I have seen some 4K stuff where, like you said, it just pops and it like looks like so realistic. But like one last thing, and then I swear I'll end
That's
it on
okay.
this. I wanted to bring up David Fincher and then Mindhunter. Did you ever see Mindhunter earlier when we were talking about TV shows?
Loved it.
Yeah, it was great, right? And your
I
thoughts on
hate that
David?
it's not coming back.
Yeah, exactly. And your thoughts on David Fincher? You think he's a
I'm a
great
fan.
director? Yeah,
I always look forward to his stuff. I will admit Mank put me to sleep almost.
I
Um,
couldn't finish it. Yeah,
I love Gary Oldman. I love what he was trying to do with it, but like 45 minutes in, I was checking my watch, and you'd think a movie like that would be made for someone like me, but by the end, it was like, who was this movie made for? But I'm a fan. Fight Club is a movie I think I appreciate more than I actually like. Love Seven, it's a masterpiece. My favorite of his is actually Zodiac. And I even love Alien 3. I did, the extended, what they call the assembly cut, the longer version, since Fincher's kind of disowned the film. But my favorite of his is Zodiac. There's something about procedurals and just watching people solve or in this case, maybe not, but trying to solve murder mystery. It's almost like one of my background movies, like when I'm working, like that's a movie I'll put on in the background. Um,
yeah.
and 3 hours, it flies by. Panic Room I like. I haven't seen it in years, but that one's finally coming to 4K actually in a couple months. The Game, haven't seen it in a while. Although Arrow put out a Blu-ray of that, I worked on it. Um, Social Network, that I would need to see again, and Dragon Tattoo I'd need to see again. Um,
Social Network I thought was really good, and I thought that would be one that like I would be kind of bored by, but I thought that was really good. But yeah, I mean, I always try and push Mindhunter when I can with my little relevance, but it's like I was
oh,
like, this could be
please
the
do.
best. Yeah, this could be like the best TV show. I was like thinking maybe it'll even beat Breaking Bad, and then it stopped. So I'm just like, why
And
the
I
fuck?
love
I just don't get why they stopped it. You know what I mean? Because
too much
so many
money.
people like it, but I mean, it's like, is it more than anything else he's gonna make? You know what I
Well,
mean?
that's the thing. On one hand, it's like, oh, why isn't Mindhunter coming back? Oh, it costs too much. But then Netflix will spend $200 million on some action movie no one will give a shit about in 6 months. It's like,
Red
do more
One, or
Mindhunter
yeah,
instead.
yeah, or like Squid Game, but obviously Squid Game's huge, and I've heard that Fincher is actually doing. I don't know if you heard about this. He's
I
doing like a
did,
Squid Game America version,
which
which
I
seems
hope he
weird to
doesn't.
me.
I hope that
It
doesn't happen. It's like, just read the damn subtitles. I mean,
it's
I
so weird. Like, it's why would you do that? And it's like the only thing I can think of is just money, I guess. Like they just know they're gonna make a ton of money off of it. But anyways, thanks for
probably.
coming on, Scott, and yeah, I'll send you the link when it's up.
Sounds good. This was fun.
It was fun. All right, bye guys.